bats out there for men, and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Vale Headfield Cricket Club for their under-13s girls cricket team. And to see their faces when they were given the cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I'd really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, the local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and work to make great cricket bats.
My name's Leslie. I have been with Moreland Family Daycare as an educator for over 36 years, I think. Family Daycare is a wonderful organisation. We look after children in our own home, they blend in with the family, and it's fantastic.
I love Family Daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children just growing and developing is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me every day. I'd recommend Family Daycare to anybody and everybody.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Natalie Abboud and I'm the Mayor of the Moreland City Council. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's council meeting. Our meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I would like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also to elders from other communities who may be here today. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moreland home. In doing so, I feel they've contributed to the positive, rich diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note this council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors, a reminder that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartiality, exercise their responsibilities in the interest of the local community, and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. If that unlikely event happens, please follow the directions issued by the council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. The councillors and officers in attendance are as follows. I'd like to introduce Councillor Sue Bolton to my far right, Councillor Anna Olivia Carley-Hannon, Councillor Helen Davidson,
Good evening.
Councillor Jess Dorney,
Hi.
The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Ali O'Farnley, Councillor Dale Martin and Councillor Lambros Tapanos. The officers in attendance are to my left, Chief Executive Officer Dr. Nerina Di Lorenzo, the Director of Social Development Arden Joseph, Director of City Infrastructure Grant Thorne, Acting Director Planning and Economic Development Sue Vujcevic, the Unit Manager of Governance Sally Curran, and the Acting Manager of Property and Governance Kim Giaquinta, the Executive Manager of Organisational Development Anita Craven, and sorry, Liz, I forgot, the Acting Director of Corporate Services Liz Rowland. So welcome everyone. I note the leave of absences tonight from Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Yildiz from 30th of October to 5th of December. I just ask, are there any apologies for other councillors, but everyone seems to be here. I need to move on to the disclosure of interests and conflict of interest.
Yes, I have a conflict of interest.
Councillor Dorney.
So I'm just getting the item.
Councillor Dorney will just state the nature of the conflict and the item.
So the item is DSD 2618, and I have an indirect conflict of duty because one of the grants that officers have put forward to be successful in the community grants program is the project is managed through a team that I work with at Merri Health.
Thanks, Councillor Donny. We also need to consider the following requests for leave of absence. So the proposal is Councillor Riley from the 6th of the 11th to the 4th of the 12th, 2018, and Councillor Tapanos from the 15th of the 12th to the 20th of the 12th. Are those dates correct? 16th, yep. 16th and 11th. Do I have a motion to approve the leave of absence requests as outlined? All. Councillor Martin, I think I saw you first, and Councillor O'Farnley as the seconder. Is there any debate on this item? No? All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay. The confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, could I please have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the meetings held on 10, 25th and 29th of October? Councillor Davidson? And do I have a seconder? Councillor Carly Hannon? Is there any debate on this item? No? No debate. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, now that we've confirmed the minutes, I'll move on to the minutes and reports of special committees. So we have no minutes or reports of special committees, so we'll move on to the petitions. Councillors, we have received a petition which is PET 1418, community concerned with car parking removal on Bonwick Street, Fawkner, D18/416359. Do I have a mover for the petition to be received? This is the car parking on Bonwick Street? Yeah. Yep. So Councillor Riley, and somebody to second that? Councillor Bolton? Yeah, thanks. Is there any debate on the item? No. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Now, I just have to clarify that this is actually a different petition. This is Gladstone, and the one I'm talking about was Bonwick Street. So this is Gladstone Parade. So I'll just, I might do that again actually, just for clarity. So this is the petition, which is the community concerned with car parking removal on Bonwick Street in Fawkner. So do I have someone to move that petition be received? Councillor Bolton. Thank you. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that little bit of confusion. And now I need to ask for any other petitions.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Riley.
This is for a petition from regarding the Gladstone Parade car park from businesses there and customers requesting the 2-hour parking limit be relaxed to 4 hours to allow workers and customers to go about their business. And the lead signature or person at the top of the petition is Charlie Ball. So,
thank you. And do I have a seconder for that petition? Councillor Davidson. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, thank you. Councillors, if there are no further petitions to be tabled, I will ask if any member of the gallery... Yep, I'm getting to that. Any member of the gallery has any other petitions to be tabled this evening, which is the time for that petition to come forward. Just come up to the lectern if you like, and you can speak briefly to the petition, and then I'll ask for a motion for it to be received. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Polly Bastow. I'm presenting a petition to close Cash Street, Coburg, in line with Moreland's integrated transport strategy. I'm here to follow up on a discussion about Moreland's integrated transport strategy at Council's last urban planning meeting. We spoke about our concerns about rat running on the very narrow Cash Street, and it's dangerous at peak times in the morning, at school home times, and at rush hour in the evening. It was mentioned that Moreland is looking to close streets running parallel to Sydney Road to encourage public transport, walking and bike usage under its new integrated transport strategy. Having read Moreland's excellent new integrated transport strategy, we'd like to put forward Cash Street, Coburg, to be part of this strategy to progressively close off streets and to create parklets. We've sent letters to all 22 residences, one of which is vacant, that would be directly affected by the closure, and we have received 18 positive responses and no negative responses. We present Council with a copy of this survey and the comments. We would be happy to have a street that encourages walking and cycling, and closing Cash Street solves the problem of a very narrow street with at the south end footpaths of less than 1 metre wide. We believe a closure would strengthen social connectedness and will encourage us all to take ownership of the street. Indeed, making a survey of our neighbours has already got this very diverse community within Cash Street talking, and we're already planning a Christmas street party. Cash Street is a very small street, and it would make an excellent test case for the Council's new street closure strategy. Cash Street is about to gain another 10 more townhouses, an almost 50% increase on the amount of houses and cars already within the street due to the development at 200 Sydney Road. By closing Cash Street to through traffic, we've also stopped the risk of cars from the newly approved multi-storey residential development at 200 Sydney Road, which has 284 car parking spaces, flooding Cash Street as a way of getting into the Sydney Road via the traffic lights at Edward Street. The dogleg intersection of Cash Street to Rennie Street and to Carl Street has been the scene of many accidents over the last 25 years.
I'll just get you to wrap it up.
Yes, and so we think it would make the whole place safer. So in conclusion, use Cash Street to test the ideas of Moreland's integrated transport strategy. We, the residents of Cash Street, are happy to be your guinea pigs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do I have a councillor that's ready to move? Councillors Riley and Bolton. Is there any debate on this item? No? So no debate. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? To the vote. Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. Thanks, Polly. Are there any more petitions that need to be tabled this evening? If there are no more petitions that need to be tabled, I'll move on to public question time. This is an opportunity for 30 minutes for citizens of Moreland to raise questions with councillors. I'd like to outline the process. Please note that if your question relates to a matter on any of the reports, this is the time to raise the question with us. Questions can also be submitted online prior to the meeting. A maximum of 2 questions is allowed per person, and questions that relate to a matter listed in the agenda will be dealt with first. When I invite you or your representative, you must ask the question without taking longer than 2 minutes. I'll ring a bell at 1 minute and 45 seconds, which means that you have 15 seconds to complete your question. If you have submitted a second question, it may, at my discretion, be deferred until all other persons who have submitted questions have asked their first question, or not be asked if the time allotted for public question time has expired. A maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject, and we will proceed to the next topic, and if time allows, return to the previous topic. Either myself or another councillor will answer your question, or I will ask the Chief Executive Officer to either provide a response or refer it to another council officer. As detailed in the meeting procedure local law, section 35:17, as chairperson, I have the right to disallow certain questions. It is defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, irrelevant, trivial or objectionable in language or substance. If a response to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there will be no formal response. However, council will action any commitments made in answering the question. Question time can only be extended for one 30-minute period, and only for the purpose of responding to questions that are related to matters listed on this evening's agenda. If your question cannot be answered, it will be taken on notice and responded to between now and the next council meeting and reported in the governance report. We have 30 minutes and I want to make sure we hear all the questions, so I request that councillors who answer address each question succinctly. and I've got the commencement time at 7:10. Yep. So we have a few questions all relating to the same report, which is DED 7018. I'll call Bernard Delacour to come forward, and I'll notice you've got two questions, so if you'd like to ask them both.
Good evening, Council. The Council officer has claimed that the opinion of the Golder Report was not refuted by Planning Panels Victoria, which our environmental representative, the representative at the panel, has confirmed is just not correct, that they were proven to be inconclusive with no evidence to support their position, and it is not a fair, balanced response to the panel's recommendation. In fact, it is deliberately misleading, and I'm sure our representative could say it better than I could. We have followed the correct process. The panel made a clear finding. Why can't the Council accept their recommendations?
Thank you. And I'll get you to ask the second question as well, if it's okay, Bernard.
Golder noted that, in their original report, ultimately it will be the Moreland City Council's obligation as a responsible planning authority to satisfy itself regarding this issue, i.e. they should not rely solely on the Golder conclusions. But isn't that just what the Council's doing? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask the Director for Planning and Economic Development to address the question.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Bernard, for your question. In terms of why council officers haven't put forward a recommendation to support the panel recommendation, it's because the panel are recommending an alternative approach, for example, to do preliminary site assessments, but that doesn't provide the assurance in terms of having an overlay in place which guarantees that contamination issues, which can have serious consequences for the health and safety of the community, are considered as a transparent tool, and it's a common tool that's used in Moreland and planning schemes across Victoria. And this second part of the question is around, in having that overlay, the environmental audit overlay in place, it means that we're not just relying on different experts that came to the panel hearing, we're actually relying on the work being undertaken and, for example, soil tests to be considered before that environmental audit overlay is removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have another two questions. I'll ask Sue Bolton to come forward and ask your two questions, please, Sue. Did I get your name right?
Yes, you did. Good evening. My question is, I'm questioning Council's rejection of the independent panel's recommendation. I would like to have explained why the Golder's report expert opinion is seen to be as not refuted. Golder was proven to be inconclusive with no evidence to support their position. ATMA, who were our environmental representatives at the hearing, cited 6 or 7 nearby sites, environmental audits for nearby sites, which are all available on the EPA website, and showed variable direction, flow direction and groundwater depth of 7+ metres, all reducing contamination potential. Golder reviewed only 3 sites, all further away, all conveniently showing south-southeasterly flow and no mention of depth. How is that not skewed research?
I'll just ask you to ask your second question as well, please, Sue.
Is it not true that many properties in industrial zones have the potential for contamination and yet don't have a proposed EAO? Why, for instance, does 4 Ann Street next door to me not have the potential for contamination? Is Golder's desktop assessment review quite arbitrary?
And I'll throw to the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the answer.
Through the Mayor, and it's again a similar response to the questions that Bernard had raised previously. So we have relied on the expert advice from Golders in informing our recommendation to Council for consideration tonight. What is clear is that there is a potential for contamination through that work, and hence the Council officer recommendation to put the environmental audit overlay across the properties on Ann Street. So that's why we're taking a precautionary approach, and we're basing that on the information provided by the technical experts that there is potential for contamination. And again, it's responding to what is a community health and safety risk down the track when, for example, a development application might be put in, that having an overlay in place helps trigger the work that needs to be done to assure that we're handling these issues in an appropriate way.
May I ask another question?
Yeah, that's fine.
In that instance, how is it that most of Ann Street doesn't have the potential to be contaminated? It's an industrial area.
So again, we're relying on the advice of the technical experts, and Golder in this case. So they do the work in terms of understanding and looking at the precincts and, for example, groundwater flows when they make their recommendations.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
So now I have another 2 questions on the same item, and I'll call Erica Klumpen. Erica, sorry. I misread it.
Yeah, I'm not a neat writer.
I'm not either.
So I live at number 10 Pitt Street, which is surrounded by 4 properties that are owned by the same gentleman. So give you context for why my questions are as they are. I wanted to understand how council and the panel justified placing the EOA on our home property and state that it won't place a burden on us as homeowners, even if we did a first floor extension that doesn't disrupt the soil at all. That will trigger a $50,000 plus environmental audit. Not to mention if we wanted to replace our dilapidated front fence, when it's got other avenues available should the land ever be developed up in the future.
Thanks, Erica. And I'll get you to ask the second question as well, please.
So my second question was, given that council and the panel both acknowledge that Pitt Street is a dead-end residential street and any future development might well be entirely residential, how does it justify placing a mixed-use zone recommendation on a potential future development which may never actually eventuate, especially given that the current landowner has just leased his commercial premise and the 2 vacant blocks next to us to ghost kitchens which are being illegally constructed right now without any permits or anything, which will operate 20 plus hours a day, 7 days a week.
And I'll ask you again to answer the question, please.
Through the Mayor, for the first question, we do acknowledge that in putting forward an environmental overlay on properties, it does place a burden on landowners to do further work, that it comes with a cost. But again, it's on the basis that that work needs to be done to demonstrate that contamination issues are being addressed for the safety of the community. In relation to the second question, even in rezoning the land, that doesn't mean that existing commercial uses can't continue to operate. But
they're not existing, just
or future. So, sorry, what was the other part of the question?
That they're already operating illegally without permits on the land with commercial uses.
I would be very happy to take that question on notice and look into that further and come back to you with a response.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Okay, so I have 3 questions relating to Newlands Road. So I'll ask Genevieve Honey, is it? Genevieve? Oh, Janine, sorry.
Janine,
yeah, Janine. Thanks, Janine.
I'm just reading my question now.
How do you plan to make the residential section of Newlands Road safe for young families, given that there is already a huge traffic problem with both the number of vehicles and the small road and the heavy vehicles speeding down the road now that council has approved 87 factories?
Thank you. So, Grant, I'll throw that over to you, please.
Through the Mayor, thank you for your question, Janine. There's a notice of motion later on in tonight's council agenda, which calls for a report into the traffic situation on Newlands Road, and it covers the various issues in the 3 questions tonight about, speed, volume, pedestrians, etc. So when that report comes back to council, that'll provide the detailed analysis of the situation and what actions can be taken on Newlands Road.
Thank you. And the next question relates to the same item. I'll ask Thomas Morris if you can come forward and ask your question.
Good evening. My wife and I live at the roundabout intersection of Newlands Road and McMahon's Road in Coburg North, adjacent to the parklands that extend towards Eggers Creek. In the past 5 years, we've seen a significant increase in the numbers of families, children, senior citizens and cyclists making use of this intersection as part of their daily commute to and from work, school, shops and appointments. There has also been a significant increase in the recreational use of the natural spaces provided by the parklands, a parkland that is included within an environmental significance overlay to maintain a peaceful and passive open space. In the past 5 years, we have also seen a significant number of collisions that have destroyed fences, damaged homes and cars, and disrupted utility supply. We have witnessed consistent dangerous driving, including excessive speeds and tailgating by hoons and professional drivers, often in very heavy trucks. Our own home was recently damaged with a car crashing through the roadside timber and metal barriers, through our fence and into an old olive tree which was uprooted, but thankfully saved our house and my wife, who was home at the time. The current impact mitigation infrastructure failed to prevent or reduce this damage. Thankfully, we are yet to witness injury to pedestrians, cyclists or other persons, but with the inevitable increase in traffic and industrial spaces are added to the north of this intersection, and Coburg North continues to grow as a recreational destination, the probability of a more horrific incident is alarming. In particular, there is currently no safe place to cross the intersection, with many people dangerously waiting for long periods on our driveway or in the middle of the actual roundabout itself. Can the council please assess the impact of increased traffic and in combination with increased pedestrian and recreational use along Newlands Road and make the suitable improvements or additions to barriers, signage and pedestrian crossings to address the inadequate safety measures currently in place? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I think I can field this one because I lived 2 doors away from you for 10 years or more. Well, in that house for 10 years. Everything that we're doing in the next 6 months or so is talking about traffic issues across the city. And I do believe that part of the motion that we'll see later in the meeting, but also the work that we're doing right across the city will work to try and resolve some of these issues. So I'm going to get Benjamin to ask his question as well, but then I'll throw to Grant for another answer along the. It's all the same topic. Thank you. Thanks, Benjamin.
My issues are very similar to Tom. Newlands Road, I have a small family, and every day we actually come down Newlands Road and face this traffic, and we cross at a roundabout which has no facilities to push a pram from a footpath down to a road. We have to go often right through the middle of the roundabout because if you try to cross into the park any other way, the trees actually block your vision. I also cycle down the road. The infrastructure is, well, you'd have to say grossly inadequate. There's a stretch of path from the roundabout heading north at the intersection of McMahon's and Newlands Road with a bike path which disappears at both ends. And coming through, I mean, one of my greatest fears is it's not going to be long before there is an accident that no one wants to know about at the roundabout where a bicycle comes through and a heavy vehicle, because there's only space for one of those and the bicycle's, going to come off worst. So the question is, echoes Tom's and Janine's questions. What is the vision? And hopefully it includes, looking at all the issues that are brought up in the motion.
Yep. Councillor Martin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to follow on from Councillor Abboud. essentially what we've done as a council is we recognise that these problems aren't just on Newlands Road, they're all over our city. We allocated $400,000 to commission what is the city's largest ever spend on an integrated transport strategy. That strategy comes back for adoption in February. So I really do encourage everyone that's here tonight that's interested in this stuff, not just for Newlands Road, but right across the city. These problems are happening everywhere. And we've commissioned what is essentially a 200-page report with recommendations, and it has hundreds of recommendations to roll out right across the city. Speed calming measures, signage, slowing the traffic down, making things safe for pedestrians, for cyclists. It has an absolute raft of measures. And it all comes down to the February meeting and whether or not the council group here supports those measures and supports rolling them out over the next 10 years. So I really do thank you and thank all the residents for coming here tonight. I also thank Councillor Bolton for putting the motion forward tonight, which we'll debate on, and hopefully in conjunction with the integrated transport strategy being adopted in February, we can really solve a lot of these issues and actually make the city a much safer place.
Could I just add a small comment, just that Newlands Road, I mean, I appreciate that there's many traffic issues. Newlands Road is slightly unique in that you've got a incredibly family intense area located between an industrial section of the city, which is being preserved as industrial, and the only access portal to that is up Newlands Road. So there's no other way for cement trucks, blah, 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 to actually enter or leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from Violetta Canedo. Thank you.
Hi. Don't remember exactly the right words, but anyway, I just wanted to ask about the removal of the railway crossings. My first question was, has any acoustic tests been done after the implementation of the railway from the southeastern railway, Skyrail? Has any test been done as to the noise that the impact of noise on after the Skyrail was done, and also too, what about the sunlight, light, the impact that it has on the homes and people living right on the railway? Has any tests been done on that? And how has it affected people's lives living on that railway? Because that's living on the Outfield line in Coburg, especially between Bell Street and O'Hare Street and further on, obviously. We're all concerned about that, about the noise, and the impact of. So just a comparison. So before, that's, what is it, the Caulfield line, Caulfield-Dandenong line. What was it before and what is it now? How has that impacted on people's lives and homes around there? And also the sound as well, the light, how has that affected and the impact that it's had on homes?
Is there a councillor that would like to respond to that question?
I've got information about the level crossing removals, but I don't have an answer to that specific question. So it might be best to throw to either planning or infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, we don't actually have any of those reports or information that you might be referring to in terms of what are the before and after results in terms of South East. But that would definitely be a question that should be directed to the Level Crossing Removal Authority and also as part of any further consultation that they undertake on the design.
Councillor Tapanos?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we do have a motion tonight about the level crossing removal, and one of the things that we are calling for in that motion is to undertake more consultation with the community in regards to these minor details. There are different technologies that are available, and it's improving all the time, particularly in regards to noise. Now, my understanding of the infrastructure projects that occurred in the south and the southeast is that it actually provides an improved outcome in regards to noise, and it is possible through an even better technology that is available now to actually improve it even further. So one of the reasons why we are moving this motion is to make sure that we are getting the best technology available in regards to noise, to lighting and other amenity issues.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos.
Can I ask a question just based on that, just a small question?
Generally, we've got quite a lot of questions on this item, I know it's a contentious issue. So I'll ask Bruce if you could come forward, please, to ask your question.
Yes, I'm just concerned about the visual impact of the train line. I do live on it, and it's going to spoil the whole landscape of the area. I'm just wondering if any of the council are concerned about that, or do they live near it?
Councillor Martin?
So if I can actually say that I would actually, if the sky rail was to go in from my backyard, I'd be looking directly at it.
Yeah, okay. And
if that answers your question.
So are you okay with all that?
So myself personally, I want to see the best outcome. So I want to see the most crossings removed that we can get across the entire city, a whole of line approach, not just for roads. I want to see east-west connectivity. I want to see things like accessibility, pedestrian outcomes, heritage, a raft of issues. And I think the consultation that's been done to date has been less than adequate. And I think we need to explore both trench and sky rail and understand the pros and cons between the two, because at the moment the community and most of the people in this room right now want to understand more about the options and why the state government is leaning towards a certain option. And I think we need better consultation. But myself personally, I am happy with either a sky rail or a trench, as long as it gets the best outcome for the broader community.
Well, I'll just tell you, I've been down to Carnegie today, just through not for any other reason but work, and I've been past Alphington, and it's just chalk and cheese. The two are just so much different.
Thanks,
it's just
Bruce.
So much less impact.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got to cut you off because I didn't allow the supplementary question before. I think we'll be talking about this a bit. Vanessa Birch, if you'd like to come forward and ask your question.
I'm Vanessa Birch and this is Braden. I'm from the No Sky Rail Upfield community group. So we have online about 300 members and it's growing. We also have a petition online which has 530 and it's growing as well. We are submitting applications to become an incorporated community group as well. So my question is about the significance of the heritage precinct and retaining that significance, particularly the train station buildings. I don't see how, if we have SkyRail implemented and how they'll be overshadowed and hidden by the SkyRails or the bridges, how that's retaining the heritage precincts. So my question is, how are you going to maintain the heritage precinct and protect the buildings as they are?
Thank you, Vanessa. Are there any councillors that would like to answer the question?
Again, just on that, so it's these details that are yet to be worked out, and it is a great opportunity to put these on the table now. Certainly the station building is of significant heritage value, so we want to make sure that we are talking to the LXRA about making sure that that is not just retained, but it's not overshadowed or obscured in the process. So that would mean making heritage a bit of a focus. But of course, if it's going to go, we're going to end up with elevated rail. That decision has been made. So it's about
won
now.
the election yet through the chair.
That is true. That is true. But at this point in time, that is the decision of the government. And I guess now it is, I think, our job to make sure that we get the best possible model within that outcome. So heritage, activation, noise, lights, all of those issues should not be neglected. They need to be on the table now. So we are seeking to work with the government and the LXRA to make sure we're putting those on the table. And I have incorporated, I know it's not in the agenda, but the heritage aspect in the resolution tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos.
Less than
Vanessa.
1% of the community responded or attended community consultations, so I don't think that we can safely say that SkyRail should be the solution.
Thank you. So I just would like to add that this is not a decision that council gets to make. So we're a little bit, hog-tied over this as well, and we can advocate for outcomes, but ultimately, if the state government doesn't listen to what we're asking them to do, and it's happened a couple of times before, and sometimes they do listen, we only can act within our means, and it's not a scenario where we get to determine the outcomes of what happens as often as we might like to. And Jason, I know you're probably busting and it's your turn to ask the question, so feel free to take the podium.
Congratulations to Natalie on your appointment as Mayor. I suppose the most frustrating thing about what you've just said then is that 18 months ago I stood here and I asked the council to take a proactive position that the community wanted. From all the people I spoke to back then, there was particularly people that are going to be most directly affected, living within 500 to 600 metres of the line. More than 90% of the people wanted a lowered rail into the trench. There was no support for a SkyRail. And the reason why the government is keen on a SkyRail is because it meets their political agenda of having completed 50 SkyRails within the 8-year period. And obviously throwing the other 25 into the next election cycle. And no doubt with the next election cycle, there'll be another 25 added. I'd like to thank Council for actually seeking to engage with the LXRA again with some fair income community consultation, because what we had last time was very brief, secretive and stage managed. It wasn't representative of proper community consultation.
You need to get to the question.
Here's the question.
Thank you.
Okay. How can council endorse removal of the level crossing removal via the SkyRail method, which I understand you're doing, Councillor Tapanos, when there is significant community and ratepayer opposition to the utilisation of SkyRail as the level crossing removal solution? So much so, as Vanessa mentioned before, we have over 530 signatures against the SkyRail for the upfill corridor on our change.org website. Oscar Yildiz, when he's actually been doing his door knocking and asking the question, as a community, would you prefer SkyRail or trench? Less than 7% of the people he's spoken to want the option that you're looking to endorse. And where is council's community consultation, surveys, polling that confirms the community and ratepayers do want a SkyRail smashed into our suburb and our existing amenity? If this doesn't exist, why? And how can it then be a situation where you're endorsing a system that your community definitely does not want?
Thank you, Jason. Just before we get an answer on that, I need to get a motion for an extension of question time because we've reached the half hour. Thank you, Councillor Bolton and Councillor Riley seconding. I'll put it to the vote. Against? Declare that carried. Are there any councillors that would like to speak to Jason's question?
No answer if there's no one else.
Councillor Bolton? Yep.
I'm sorry it's taken so long for you to start to get some discussion going about this issue, although there are probably not a lot of answers yet, I think, because there's not much information really which has come out of the Level Crossing Authority. And I personally feel that it is, so this is a personal position rather than a council position, because council hasn't said definitely it supports one version or the other. But but there has been a lot of community discussion, and I think opinions quite divided in Moreland. But I personally feel that a number of the people who are advocating SkyRail, hoping to get more open space and better cycling infrastructure, I think are basing that viewpoint on aspiration rather than real information coming from the level crossing authority. So I actually think it's for some of the people who are advocating SkyRail, I think it's premature to come down on that side of the debate. I don't feel that there's adequate information being presented. But there's still a lot of information that needs to be extracted from LXRA, and I think council needs to play a role in trying to extract that information. And the consultation was not just poor, it was totally inadequate and appalling, and needs to be done again, in my opinion.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Thank you, Jason.
I thought Councillor Tapanos.
Councillor Tapanos, sorry,
I'm
thank you.
happy, although I'm sure this will be debated when the motion comes up before the chamber. But look, it's been a long-standing advocacy campaign of this council to get Coburg and Oak Park and as many other crossings removed as possible. So in my view, and I'm proposing tonight, is firstly saying, yes, thank you. We welcome the announcement of getting the additional 2, which makes it 4 on the upfield line. That is an achievement that we've been advocating for. We don't have currently a view whether it should go up or down. Nonetheless, the major objective was to get as much as possible. Having said all of that, we're not going to get a say on whether it should go up or down. The decision has been made. So the question before us, and this is where the bulk of the motion rests, is how could we get the best benefit going forward from here in regards to the issues that are going to be so critical from an amenity perspective, which I mentioned previously. So it's recognising a reality. Whether we are happy or upset about it, it is the current reality of the model that's been selected. And that has been selected because of, my understanding is engineering, and there's a big basalt sort of plain and a lot of rock in this vicinity, which makes it awfully expensive.
We can probably get to the debates when we
hear
the motion. We'll talk about it more.
But the issue is that there is different models and the technology is improving all the time. So we want to make sure we get the best model and the best technology available. So it is important to engage with them proactively, and that's what this motion is seeking to do.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos.
Just through the chair, I'd just like to add though that Waverley Park, when they stopped playing AFL football out there, based on heritage issues, they stopped the pulling down of the grandstand. Now that stand was only up for about 25 years. It was only going to be used as a football ground. We've got railway stations that were built in the 1880s that weren't replicated anywhere else, that aren't existing in metropolitan Melbourne. And I think if you wanted to contest on the community's behalf the imposition of a SkyRail into our suburbs, you could easily use the heritage trigger to fight a SkyRail being utilised.
Thank you. I'll now ask if Andrew Boddington can please come up to the podium to ask his question on the same item. Andrew? Is Andrew still here? We just might put that to the side for a second, move on. John Engler, two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My first question relates to the council action plan. There's a couple of items in there. One is a clarification of lighting of upfield bike path between Tinning and Moreland Road to be completed by June 2019, but that would be impacted by the level crossing removal of Moreland Road. So I'd like to see what is the expected outcome. And the second is Vic Road seems to have delayed the extension of the upfield bike path up to the Western Ring Road to 2019-2020 financial year, even though they have funded it this year. Why have they done that? That's my first question. My second question relates to the level crossing removal. As elevated rail viaduct has already been chosen by the current state government, can council advocate for an elevated cycle veloway as part of the level crossing removal design? And I'd also like to note that all infrastructure, we need to consider it through a climate change lens in terms of how can we mitigate climate change. We've already got a policy in Moreland of cooling the upfield corridor. I submit that Skyrail would provide better capacity for vegetation and tree canopy, which the trench solution just couldn't provide.
Can you turn that into a question, John?
So my question is, can council advocate for an elevated cycle veloway as part of the level crossing removal design by the Level Crossing Removal Authority?
Yep, and the other question is about the delays on the upfield bike path.
The other question related to the upfield bike path extension and the lighting upgrade.
Yep. So, Grant, can you talk to those questions, please?
Through the Mayor, thanks for the questions, John. In relation to the funding of the upfield bike path and the bit from Box Forest Road through to the Ring Road, you are correct in the sense the state government, as part of the 18-19 state budget, announced $3.5 million of funding for that project, which is to be delivered by Vic Roads. Vic Roads have advised us they're doing design this financial year and construction the following year, as in 1920. I've written to Vic Roads asking for clarification on that, because that's not, as we understood it, as part of the budget announcement.
I think Nerina can talk to the second part of the question, if that suits you. Yep. Thank you.
Hi, just through the Mayor. So similar to the previous query on the acoustics, we can pass that query on to the LXRA, both your query about a veloway and your query about acoustics. The only thing I'll say about the idea of a veloway is you still have to get people down to ground level.
Limited entry and exit points. So we're not asking for a lot of access, but where the railway line comes up and comes down, that would be where cyclists would go up and come down as well.
All right, thanks for clarifying that. So we can just, we'll just let you know that we can pass that through in any of the contact that we have as well. We'll see what we can hear from that.
And just to note that there is a lot of cyclist support for Skyrail and the Veloway proposal in Moreland. So, the community is divided, and I respect my colleagues here who also oppose the Skyrail. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'll ask Caspar to come to the podium to ask. Thank you.
Hello. My question is in regards to the Planning Amendment C164, and it's kind of in two parts, but it's very short. The first part is, does Council consider the current rate of residential development in and rezoning in Brunswick East as sustainable? And the second part is, in light of the number of dwellings increasing by 100% to 7,800 during the last decade in Brunswick East, how does Council plan on meeting their projection of less than 1,100 dwellings in the suburb by 2036 when they continue to rezone land for residential development?
Thank you, Caspar.
Through the Mayor, Caspar, thank you for your question. So the rezoning of residential land is in alignment with Council's already adopted Moreland Industrial Land Use Strategy, where we have identified areas that can transition to residential development. And there is a broader strategic basis in terms of that Moreland is a growing community in terms of population, and we need more dwellings. And, for example, over the next 2 decades, we're needing around 38,000 new homes to be built in Moreland. So the release of residential land is a really, or release of land for residential development is important to meet the needs of the community and the growing community into the future.
Can I just add something to that question? Don't you think that building more homes will make people come here, not the other way around?
Thank you. I think we'll just leave that there because we get the gist of the question, you know.
Okay.
Thank you. I now have 2 questions relating to Michael Street. So, Christian, if you would like to come forward and ask your question. Thank you.
I would like to start to say that I am a proud citizen of Brunswick, and I live in the Oco apartment in Michael Creek on the 2nd floor. The problem has been with the floods. I mean, I've been living there for about 5 years. Both the plate off the plane, and in 5 years, about 7 times we had flooding with the creek. And I got consequence of that. The water come into the building, and the lift are not working anymore. The last time it happened on Melbourne Cup Day, and I got consequence of that. For 4 days, I was unable to leave my apartment, and I don't think this is right at all. And also I would like to you to consider that it's not only for me, because in that building there are quite a few elderly people who live there and will have a very similar issue to me. So what I would like to know is, what is the council going to do to finally fix the problem on a permanent basis? Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I'll get the second question as well from Tony relating to the same issue, which is the floods. Is Tony here? Yeah. Oh, come up, Tony. Stay there if you want, Christian.
From here?
Yep.
Yeah. So I had 2 questions, if that's okay. But maybe just to elaborate on the description of what happened. So last Tuesday, the roads, footpaths, and a number of buildings around the corner of Sydney, Michael Street and Saxon Street were inundated in a major flood. The flooding completely inundated a 7-storey building. It badly damaged several of the businesses on the ground floor. They've had to rip out all of their interiors, and they're in the process of doing that. The ground floor of the 7-storey apartment building was completely flooded. The elevators, the emergency stairs, 3 levels of basement car parks, to the point where there was at one point 2 metres of water in the basement 3 car park, which took about 24 hours to pump out. There was extensive damage to property, cars, motorbikes, common property in the building, as well as about 100 people's property that was stored in storage cages on basement 1, 2 and 3. It also caused the lids on several stormwater pits, which the council has recently installed, just last year in some cases, to float and expose those concrete pits, which are about 2 metres deep, about 1 metre wide and about 80 centimetres wide. They're all being installed along Michael Street, where the flooding repeatedly occurs. And an elderly gentleman who was about 70 years old fell into one of those pits while he was trying to get back to his car while the street was completely flooded. When it's flooded, you can't see where the holes in the ground are, where the exposed pits are. He was pulled out of one of those pits. It was deep enough for him to go under. The water went over his head. He was pulled out by a resident who just happened to be standing on the flooded footpath. That gentleman could easily have seriously hurt himself while falling into the pit, and he could easily have died. As could somebody who would have been trapped in the basement car parks while the building was flooding, given that the lifts were flooding with water and the emergency exit stairs were also flooding with water. Council has been provided with quite shocking video footage of the water flooding into the building and the street flood and the exposed stormwater pits. This level of flooding has happened 4 times in the last 4 years, so I'd say catastrophic flooding. The building's been there for 5 years. It's happened 4 times in the last 5 years. Less severe, but still dangerous flooding has occurred around 15 times in that location in the last 5 years. Long-term residents in the area have told me that area, before the building was built, that area has been flooding for many, many years. So this is a known area of street flooding. For 4 years, we've been contacting council repeatedly to let them know about these flooding events, the degree of flooding, the damage to the property, which is, in terms of that one building, would be well over $200,000 in terms of insurance that the owners' corporation has had to pay out. Forget about what the owners themselves have had to have incurred in terms of damage to their property. This year, the Melbourne Cup was the first time somebody was actually almost killed. But so council's been getting informed about this for the last 4 years. The flooding, the damage to the property, and the danger to human life in the building and on the footpath in the street.
Tony, I know that you're speaking on behalf of a lot of people, but I do need you to start
hurry
winding
up.
up. Yeah.
Okay. Council has most frequently ignored our approaches and not even returned emails, phone calls. This is all documented. It's extremely disappointing and it's quite shocking, to be honest, and that it actually has taken somebody to almost die as a result of this for it to kind of come to a bit of a head. Council has responded in a number of ways, limited, piecemeal ways that have not fixed the problem, and they've been told that after each of those actions, it didn't fix the problem, including April of this year. We got no response to that last contact at all. So I'm here on behalf of a very large number of people, including Christian, to ask that council, in fact, to beg council to help us on this issue. We have spent 4 years providing council with information, photos, statements, and have got nowhere really, including statements for the last 2 years about the danger of those stormwater pits, that the lids float off, and that someone needed to come out and lock them down. Photos, repeatedly, and nobody has done that. Now a gentleman fell into one.
Yeah.
So that's the most shocking thing. So specifically, we'd like a response from council, like on the question that Christian has asked, but specifically on 2 things. How council approved the building as it's designed in this location where it has been subject to historic street flooding from insufficient stormwater drains. So how that was approved without the design being modified to stop the flooding, or a plan in place to reduce the stormwater flooding itself.
I really need you to start wrapping up.
Yep.
Sorry,
And
Tony.
the second one is what the residents can't do anything about it. It's that we've sandbagged our properties. We've got a plan in place to evacuate people and check the basement car parks when the flooding occurs. We have been begging council for information about what's causing the flooding and how we can stop it. They don't provide it. So what will council do to help us stop this flooding from happening? And when is council going to provide us with that information or that help? Last year...
I really need you to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry because I know this is a really important issue, but everyone has got important
Sure,
stuff
sure.
that they've brought here
Sorry.
this evening.
Yeah, it's been 5 years. That's
Yeah,
all.
I understand.
Last year, the area flooded 5 times in December.
Yeah,
Yep.
I believe I'm beginning to understand the seriousness of the issue that you and Christian have outlined. And I think rather than get a short answer, it's probably a good idea to take it on notice, because I suspect this is going to be a bigger piece of work than we can talk to tonight in the chamber.
Okay.
If there is any information, I'd love to hear some information.
I just didn't want them to miss out on it.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously there'll be a more detailed response, but this is the first I'd heard of this, so thank you for bringing it. I'd like to know a little bit more.
Through the
There'll be
Mayor.
some more information in the newspapers tomorrow.
Through the Mayor, thanks for the question, Christian and Tony. As you may be aware, you've received a letter today from our Complaints Resolution Officer which details answers to some of those questions, which I'll briefly touch on now. The planning scheme did not require the setting of a flood level for the building, so it was up to the building surveyor, building designer, builder to set the level when the building was built. We acknowledge, though, that the building is flooding, and as was being pointed out, it flooded quite badly again on Melbourne Cup Day, and particularly acknowledge Christian's issues in being, contained within the building during that time. The lifts, etc., in your building was not working. But the issues around Michael Street and the building are complex and detailed, and do require, full investigation to be able to provide a detailed response to you about what council can do and what council cannot do. I can say, though, that we have put CCTV cameras down those drains a number of times in recent years, and we're doing it again in the next few days to ensure the drains are clear and not, and the maximum amount of water is getting away. We're also undertaking work to, fix or secure the pit lids, so the issue of the pit lids coming off will be dealt with. As I said, it is complex. There are issues on both sides. Council has some works planned in next financial year which will alleviate some of the flooding, but will not alleviate all of the flooding in that area.
Thank you.
What is the process going to be?
Sorry, I can't let this conversation play out like this. I'm really sorry, but I'm sure that you'll be hearing.
Suppose there be a meeting, or has that happened already?
It's already happening.
We'd like to know what's going to happen from here, because typically we engage council and get ignored, and it's been going on for 5 years.
So I'm under the impression that a response was provided today about what will happen next to the residents.
A one-page response, which really provides virtually no information at all. Someone almost died last Tuesday.
Mayor, can I just propose that maybe we do take this offline and have a meeting with the ward councillors, residents and officers to go through the details of the issue?
I think that's a great proposal, Councillor Tapanos. Thank you. Nerina?
Just so through the Mayor, just to confirm, we'll take as an action to arrange that meeting to walk you through. There was a response provided today. I know that's not complete, but you heard from the Director that there's a fair bit more to be done to be very clear about what actually needs to happen there. Very happy to arrange that, and we'll take that out of here as an action.
Thank you. So that was actually the last of the questions that we had submitted for question time this evening. So that will conclude public question time, and I'll now move on to the business listed in the agenda, starting with the council reports. So the first report that we have to consider this evening is DCI 4218, Public Lighting Policy Adoption. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. Can I move the officer's recommendations with a slight amendment? And I'll read the amendment and then ask for a seconder.
Yep.
So the amendment is to read on page 12 to change the order of priority of actions to take when antisocial behaviour, where there is antisocial behaviour as outlined on page 12 to the following. So it's changing the order so that turning lighting off is further down the list of the priorities. So the first point would be using motion sensors, improving passive surveillance. 3, Then if turning lighting off is to be considered, Moreland Vicpol is to be advised and invited to comment on the proposal. And then number 4 is installing CCTV footage. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Do I have a seconder to the amended motion? Councillor Donny? Councillor Davidson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes. So this public lighting policy went out for community consultation and it's back to us tonight to be adopted. The changes that I want to make, in my mind, prioritise community safety rather than vandalism. I understand the recommendations are to discourage vandalism, but I feel that by turning off lighting, that's not a good option for community safety and the perception of community safety. Instead, having motion sensors, I feel, is a more appropriate measure to put in place. And then if turning off public lighting is to be considered, I think that Moreland Vic Police need to be consulted. Potentially that might be an area that they disagree that lighting should be turned off in, and I think their opinion as an important stakeholder should be weighed in quite heavily.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Donny, as a seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, I mean, ideally it's quite a straightforward council policy. We're looking at improving safety through our lighting, improving passages for pedestrians and cyclists, lighting up our public laneways only when there is heavy use, as well as being able to manage the assets and light our public venues and sporting grounds, etc. The key changes, I think Councillor Davidson's alternative is reasonable. I think as a priority, it's through community consultation anyway, but just making sure that we are prioritising safety of our community. And I would just like to highlight the use of the change around transitioning to low energy lighting, particularly such as the LED lights, which is in line with moving to zero carbon and our greenhouse abatement policy. So.
Thank you, Councillor Donny. Are there any councillors who wish to speak against the motion? If there are no councillors who want to speak against, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next item on the agenda is DSD 2518, the draft Gender Equality Commitment released for community consultation. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Davidson, and a seconder? Oh, sorry.
So this is going out for community consultation as opposed to the other one which has come back for adoption. So we're asking the community to have a look at the policy on gender equality and Moreland's commitment to it. There are a few amendments that I would like to include, and it's probably more so to draw attention to these particular points and acknowledge the people that have contributed heavily to the report. So I think it's up on the screen. To endorse the draft Moreland gender equality commitment to, sorry, is that? Yep, the amendment?
Yep.
Yep. Sorry?
Following a minute, insert.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Insert into the context on page 3 of the gender equality commitment, the words gender equality is, sorry, I can't see that far.
A precondition?
A precondition for the preservation of family violence, prevention of family violence and other forms of violence against women and girls. And the second point is to acknowledge and thank the work and commitment of the working group and all the members of the community who've contributed to the work with their input. And also I wanted to thank the councillor and now Mayor, Natalie Abboud, who has also contributed to this working group quite heavily by attending the meetings and the consultation process.
I'll just get you a seconder.
Thank you.
I'm happy to. Councillor Donny?
So this is a great body of work that's going to inform many areas that Moreland operates in. Some of the key points in there would be Moreland's commitment to building a community that's free of gendered violence, supporting equal pay, and education for all genders around respectful relationships. So that would go to things like our maternal child and health system, even things like our lighting policy. This piece of work will help inform. So I'll leave that up to Council to debate.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Dorney?
I too would just like to acknowledge the immense amount of work that's gone into this draft to get the framework to where it is, from both community members, councillors and officers as well. It seems that, although I wasn't involved when it commenced 11 months ago, I feel like there has been a diverse membership of different stakeholders and experts that have been consulted in the community, and it's at a really good place to go out to seek further feedback. I agree with Helen's alternative in the sense that we do really need to highlight and reinforce that the experience of unacceptably high rates of family violence in our community and that gender inequality is intrinsically linked. Intimate partner violence is one of the leading causes of preventable death, illness and disease for women in our community aged between 18 and 44, which is so substantial, and the fact that it's preventable is that we really can do a lot of work. Council is doing lots in this space, from a strong stance on gambling reform, increasing female participation in sport, and the raft of female and well-balanced gender we have on executive and through our governance structures. But I think there's lots more we need to do. This framework is really just supporting and continuing that path and progression, and really promoting and working with our community. I like how the framework is really recognising gender as a spectrum rather than a binary concept. And also acknowledges the intersectionality between that and the compounding issues that people of same-sex attracted or gender diverse do experience in the community. I also like that, like everything, we acknowledge that this can't be done by council alone, and it's a partnership. So it's going out for draft. I really encourage the community to have a read and provide your feedback, and I'm looking forward to it coming back.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Are there any councillors who wish to speak against this motion? Councillor Riley, would you like to make a comment about the motion?
I would just briefly thank the Councillor Davidson and Councillor Dorney for their comments. I just wanted to stand today to speak about this because I think as a male and with the kind of, circumstances we've been living with in our city in the last week or so, and we just heard another fairly serious case where people have been sort of subject to the forces of nature as well. Violence comes in many forms. This council's done a lot of work in this area to try and address that as much as we can, and I think that revisiting this statement about women, which we began over 20 years ago, is really significant. I just want to acknowledge that women in my life have been very important role models and leaders. I think the report is really good because it's addressing the gender diversity issue and the LGBTIQA stuff. Sorry. It's all right. I just want to say that it's really important that we give men a chance to speak about their problems and to find ways of working in our communities that allow them to reform themselves, to find new ways of being males and expressing their masculinity. There's been some attacks on a man recently in the last couple of days in the political arena around the state election, which I think has been disgusting. Some people make mistakes. Some people have those mistakes play out where they actually injure themselves and others and cause great harm. We need to find ways as a community to give men an opportunity to step up and show the better side of themselves. And where they've been brought up in communities where they haven't learned ways to do that, to be able to express their feelings and their concerns, we need to give them a break. And I think this statement is one way of helping us to do that. And as one of the leaders in this community, I intend to step up and to try and allow that space to be created. We need to give more voice to those males who are quietly working away, being great fathers, brothers, uncles, and all sorts of relationships in their families. We need to hear from them. And I invite those men to step up now from this day forward. And when we launch this on International Women's Day next year, I would like to see lots of men turning up and telling their stories of what it's like being a good bloke in Moreland or in Victoria or in Australia, and that we can put behind us some of these scenes we've seen in the last few weeks, and some of the cases coming through court, which are just tragic and disgusting and things we don't need, so that we can actually have much more peaceful, livable and enjoyable lives. So I just want to say that. Sorry, it was very emotional for me to do that, but this work is incredibly important, and I just think the words that Helen and Jess have said have been ideal, and I just wanted to add to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I just want to add something quickly because I was involved from a kind of a disconnected position as one of the councillors responsible for women, and it's something that I've been involved in, being a councillor responsible for women, which I've shared with Councillor Davidson since I was elected on the council, and I will continue to do that. But when we looked at the 20-year-old statement of commitment to women, we realised that there was a whole lot of work to do in terms of updating what that even was. I think it's important to acknowledge that when the draft comes back and is signed off, that this work is a living, breathing thing, like we're living, breathing people trying to be equals in the world that we inhabit. And I think that, and Councillor Riley kind of covered this off a little bit, but one thing that the first big workshop uncovered was a group of men who were calling themselves, and still continue to call themselves, the Allies of Change, who got so much from that first meeting that they've continued to meet while the working group, the core working group, continued to develop the draft. That group has met, the Allies of Change have met independently just because they found great value in having those meetings. And I think that part of making life better for women and gender diverse and genderqueer people in the community involves supporting men, because it seems like there are some problems that need to be resolved with men. So I really have enjoyed being involved in this work, and I look forward to contributions to the draft, but I also really want to commend a million times, and I'm not taking credit for this, I'll reject that, sorry, Councillor Davidson, but I really want to commend the level of consultation, because this just went out and out and out with just a few key questions that got fed back into the core group, and I think that that level of consultation really taps into what we're aiming to do with regard to our communications and engagement strategy as well, and I think that we've set a great precedent with that work. It's been a really good kick-off point. So I commend the work highly, and I'm be very happy to support the draft going out for consultation. Councillor Bolton?
I just want to add something briefly. I don't want to repeat all of the comments which have been made. I think this is incredibly important, and it is important to add in addition to the whole question of the rights of women, the question of recognition and equality of people who are gender diverse and all the different groupings. But I hope when, after the public consultation, this all comes back, I think it's really important that in the final version that's adopted, that the work is communicated in a very popular language, because at the moment I think coming through the movement in the communities that have been really focused on winning their rights, there are certain terms that people have adopted to try and explain their situation, discrimination against themselves. But they're known in certain parts of the community, but not all parts of the community. And I think, really important questions like equality and discrimination and freedom from violence need to be something which can be properly understood in order to be counter the violence and discrimination that occurs. So that would just be one comment I'd like to add in addition.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Would anyone else like to say anything about this motion? If there's no more arguments in favour of the motion, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. Okay, the next item on the agenda is EMOD 618, the Council Action Plan 2018-19 Performance Report First Quarter, 1st of July to 30th of September 2018. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Riley, and a seconder? Oh, sorry, do you need to talk to it first? No. Seconder?
I'm happy to speak to it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, this
Councillor Martin, sorry. Oh.
Sorry? Do we have a seconder?
Your family, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hopefully find it a little easier to talk about this. This is actually an omnibus report, meaning it's got lots and lots of stuff in it, so I suggest people need to read it. But just briefly, it does give us an update on our action plan, which is reported every quarter, and there are a number of changes in there that need to be spelled out so people can see the items numbered up on the board there. I won't read them all. We set this plan at the beginning of our term, so every year we get a chance to review it and revise it, and our budget aligns with it. And most of the changes that we have here are due to matters that are kind of out of our control, really, whether it's the state government or other bodies that we need to work with. So I just want to commend the staff for the work they've been doing on this, and the rest of the community as well in helping us to achieve this. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor O'Fonnell?
I'm okay.
Any other councillors like to speak to this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next item on the agenda is DCI 4318, O'Hay Street and Main Street, Coburg intersection, redesigned and flat top speed hump locations in O'Hay Street between Sussex and Main Street. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Riley?
Thanks. I'm moving the motion with an amendment, which will come up and be viewable in a minute. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton.
Councillor Bolton. I just would like to add at number 4 that Council works towards a meeting with VicTrack or the Transport Minister, the local communities of O'Hay Street and Main Street and Boundary Road, where a similar bike path crosses the uphill line at the earliest opportunity. Just make sure I'm reading you'll tell me if I've got it wrong. To address the safety concerns and a better solution for local pedestrian and bicycle users of these paths. So for the viewing public, these are on O'Hay Street, it's a famous bicycle path that we built as a council with both riders on one side of the street, so they're actually kind of adjacent to the footpath and not on the road. So it's a safer and better bike path, but one of the issues is about getting back onto the road. Once those paths finish, you've got to cross over. So this is where we've been trying to deal with it. The second part of the fifth dot point is councillors are provided with information which provides data on similar bi-directional bike paths in Victoria and whether they cross train lines or not prior to actioning point 4. That's just to give us a context to how that sits in the debate. So just to speak to this briefly, I want to thank all of the working group people and all of the councillors that have been involved in helping to get this happening, along with the staff, to try and arrive at a plan that will be amenable to the community. There's schools along here and buses use the street, so we're actually putting in speed humps that are longer and flat top to allow the buses to get across those, but also to go at a safe speed. It seems to be one of the most outstanding issues is that VicTrack won't allow us to run that bi-directional bike path across their railway line, and we have to actually stop the path on the western side, and that's where we need to get the bike riders back onto the other side of the street in a safe manner, and it's about how we do that. And the plan has tried to address it in some way, but we feel it needs to be attacked in a slightly stronger way to try and, so my suggestion is that we actually take this up with VicTrack and probably with the new minister once the new government's been decided.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bolton?
Yeah, I'd like to speak in favour of the motion, especially now that there's an amendment, because without that amendment about seeking a meeting with VicTrack, which I gather VicTrack has been refusing to meet with council to discuss this area. It actually is a very dangerous area. There was a petition presented to council about this intersection about 4 years ago. And this intersection was the subject, was one of the issues of traffic, pedestrian safety, cyclist safety, that was raised by residents a couple of years ago, actually probably 3 or 4 years ago when I first sort of took it up on behalf of residents. I definitely, I think it's definitely appreciated some of the work that council's doing, and the fact that Vic Roads has come to the party on some of the safety measures on the street. But this is a particularly nasty intersection, and I think there really needs to be traffic lights there. And I gather we have been blocked from traffic lights, but I can't really see any other way of making it safer, plus extending the bike path across the level crossing there. At the moment, this whole configuration is problematic because it means that cyclists who've got children's trailers have to cross the road with their children's trailers sticking out the back, because it's actually not really a safe crossing. And the reality is most cyclists are not going to go across and around and back and you look back and so forth. The reality is people are going to go the most logical direction, which is straight forward east across that level crossing. So there definitely is a need for more work than just what's proposed in this resolution. But, council is blocked by VicTrack at the moment in doing this. But certainly, I think in addition to one of the residents who's been contacting council, there are those earlier petitions which council would have on record, and certainly one cyclist who came to a council meeting about 3 or 4 years ago who received severe spine injuries, and one of the issues is the fact that the railway crossing is raised, and so that obscures visibility on all sides when traffic's turning from O'Hay Street into Main Street and vice versa. So, the whole thing is really problematic. But anyway, there's some positive measures proposed, but we definitely need this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? There's the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next item on the agenda is DSD 2618, Community Grants Program 2018-19, recommendations for organisational support and project grants. And I believe Councillor Dorney's going to absent herself.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I need a mover for this report, please. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Bolton, would you like to speak to this report?
I don't really have any special things to say. Apart from the fact that there are a lot of great projects which have been recommended for receiving council grants, and for some of the organisations that aren't being recommended to receive council grants, there are some other pathways being proposed for those organisations, other grant categories. So yeah, I think that is sort of good. Yeah, I might just leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Carly Hannon?
Yeah, I'll just say that community grants are a really excellent way for us to support our local community groups, and there's a lot of great groups that have listed for the grants this year.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, I'd just like to say one thing, and I would like to acknowledge the community groups that applied for a grant but didn't receive one, because there were a lot of fantastic ideas in there that didn't meet our kind of strict criteria. So I really do acknowledge the time and effort that does take to make these applications. So it's just a shout out to those groups that weren't successful. It is actually still valued, the ideas that you're putting up, and I really do hope that you find other ways of funding those projects.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Tapanos, did you want?
I mean, I was going to say things along the same lines, just to congratulate everyone and thank you for their applications. There are some fantastic projects there, and I think if you really analyse them, you would see that it's got some great diversity of groups as well, which represent our community. Really pleased to see the Nepalese Association in particular, who often talk about how we have the highest concentration of Nepalese people in Moreland. So it's really great that we are out there supporting those community organisations, and of course the Moreland Toy Library, which is a favourite of mine, and I know the great work that they do there. So it's really good to see this, and congratulations. I just want to conclude with, this is, I think, some of the best money we spend as a council. Sometimes the community just knows how to get so much more value for their dollar than what we do, and councils. So I'm really pleased that we're giving them money, because we just see so much stuff done with such a small amount of money.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillors, if there's no further debate on this item, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Could we have Councillor Dorney back in the room, please? The next report we need to consider this evening is DED 7018, Amendment C164, Brunswick Mills Rezoning Decision Gateway 3, Council Action Plan Item D18400-784. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Martin. Thank you.
So I would like to move the officer recommendation tonight.
And do I have a seconder? Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, so briefly. So for those that aren't aware, what this is essentially doing is it is categorising our industrial land into one of three categories. One is a core industry and employment area. The second is an employment area, so a mixed use sort of area, and the third being a transition to residential area. What we're doing in this report, and originally it came back differently, we were going to move everything tonight, but what we're actually doing is we're going to have a second part. The government recently announced what's called a Commercial Zone 3, which we believe would be a perfect opportunity to apply to our Category 2 areas, which essentially means when officers have an application come through, we actually spend a lot of time working with the applicant to try and get an actual employment area. And so we're talking about the maker spaces, places for artists, office space. We're not talking about every single development being a coffee shop with residential above it. We actually want to have employment areas in the city, and it's really important that while we go through this transition, we don't lose all of the jobs in Moreland. We need to have employment areas, and so it's really important that we acknowledge that there's a huge housing demand at the moment. The proximity to the city, the public infrastructure obviously needs to continue to improve, but we are in a really privileged position in Moreland, and we want to not only allow for greater housing to house all those people in the city, but also provide employment areas. It's really important that we maintain that and even increase the employment of the city. I would also like to just touch on, because I know the residents came here tonight to talk about the environmental overlays. I thank you for coming tonight, and I acknowledge the position that you're in, and it is a really frustrating position that you're in. as our role in governance, we have to make sure that the future residents and whatever that land ends up being, it might be a situation where you may not be doing anything, or you might be just extending, but at some point in time, there may come a time where it's redeveloped into a childcare centre or something along those lines. And we need to make sure that by putting in this precaution of the environmental overlay, that we protect those residents and potentially children or whoever it might be. We need to make sure we have that protection. So thank you for coming, but I'm sorry, I'm proposing that we move ahead with this overlay in place.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Carly-Hannon? Is there anyone who would like to speak against this motion? Councillor Tapanos?
Not against per se, but to move an amendment if that's acceptable, or two amendments. I think I might propose them separately. The first amendment will be under point 2A and later a section I to amend the details for 6 and 8 Ann Street to delete apply the EAO, which is the Environment Audit Overlay, and replace with non-applicable to indicate that the EAO is not proposed to be applied to these properties. And
did you want to do one at a time?
Yeah, I think I'll do one at a time because I'm seeking to have a similar treatment for Pitt Street, but I think that there are different issues and should be debated separately.
Councillor Martin, is that?
No.
So is there a seconder for that amendment?
Sorry, can we just see both the amendments rather than debate both of them? But if I could just read, so we're just aware of what the next one will be, just in case there's some reference to the thank you.
It's just something to do two different properties.
Thanks.
Okay, so what you're doing there, and you've separated them because you're talking about 6 and 8 Ann and also 10 Pitt Street.
Sure.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, so it was unsatisfactory. So is there a seconder to the amendment that Councillor Tapanos has proposed? So Councillor Carly-Hannon seconded the initial motion, so can she second the...
Oh, that's all right, I'll stay on the initial one.
So the amendment has lapsed for want of a seconder? And then would you like to...
I'd like to see if there's a seconder for the second one, which is to amend...
so just for the sake of formality, is the second amendment, which is to amend the details of 10 Pitt Street, is that agreeable to the motion? And is there a seconder for the second motion, second amendment? So that's lapsed for want of a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Tapanos. Is there anyone that would like to speak against the motion? Yes, in favour? Absolutely.
Debate. Look, I just want to rise to speak in relation to these, well, essentially the amendments that have just been lost and the issues around the environmental overlay. The sensitivities in this city around contamination and potential contamination are issues that come to this chamber all too regularly. And as a governance body, I believe we need to take a very risk-averse approach to this matter, and that's why I'm supporting this by maintaining the environmental overlay apply. Brunswick is riddled with all sorts of contamination. Most of us don't know what's in our backyards and so on because of what happened in history. And I know this is not necessarily a private space, but where there's been industry, it's even more likely that there's been contamination. I think that we need to err on the side of the precautionary principle as outlined earlier. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any other... Councillor Bolton?
Add just a little bit to that. I definitely, I haven't had any contact with the residents who've been affected by this, but I have had some contact with other contaminated sites, and there is a property, now a block of units, in Barclay Street, Brunswick, which some years ago there wasn't an environmental audit done on this particular block of flats. And once it was discovered how contaminated it was, everyone legally pointed the fingers at each other, and the building was at the stage where furniture was being moved in and it had to be pulled down and environmental audit done, site cleaned up, and a new block of flats built. And I feel that in general in the state of Victoria, and probably not just Victoria, but Australia, there are so many sites where we don't know which are contaminated, where there has been groundwater contamination, or it depends, every site's a bit different. But one of the sites I'm familiar with, where the contamination has filtered through the fractured rock systems, and there's sky-high contamination on parts of that site. And I am worried about future situations where people have moved out of the area, don't realise about previous contaminations, and residents suffer really severe situations as a result of that. So I am familiar with residents, a situation in Brisbane where residents were affected by a disused industrial site and later on gained a lot of terrible illnesses, and it took a long time to track down what the cause of that was, and it because a lot of the historical memory had been lost. So I definitely understand it's a really difficult issue for the owners, but I just feel that there are so many examples where people have been affected by contamination without realising where the contaminations come from. So, I'm very much sorry, but...
Councillors, I'm really sorry, I can't allow any comment from the gallery. Sorry.
Has anyone
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Is there any further debate on this item?
Yeah, I might say just
Councillor
a couple of
Tapanos?
words. Look, overall, I'm going to support the motion because it deals with a substantial issue in regards to our rezonings, which I'm broadly supportive of, and very happy to see the new zone actually, because I think it's a real shame that what's happened in the past has been we have these commercial areas and developers think it's okay to build a coffee shop and then 5 or 6 stories of apartments. Really, we need a better mix. That's not the intention of the zone, never was. It's meant to be an employment precinct. So this will hopefully rectify that. But I must express my disappointment a little bit in regards to the environmental audit overlays. And I know those motions failed to receive a seconder. But, we send this process, this planning amendment process, through a robust independent panel. And the recommendation of that panel was that it wasn't warranted. And I think that when you have a look at the all of the reports that are in that recommendation and were presented, you will find that it is very unlikely that there is contamination. So on the balance, yes, we take the issue very serious, but when we have the expert advice which says it's not warranted and a decision of the panel that says it's not warranted, then I find it hard when we actually go against those decisions. They are the experts and they listen to the evidence and they read all the documentation. But nonetheless, I'm willing to accept the outcome of the chamber and do think that we should send this to the minister now because there's so many more benefits in regards to getting those rezonings through.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. If there is no further debate, I'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
We have it noted as unanimous.
Have that recorded as unanimous, please. The next report we have to consider this evening is DCI 4418, the Establishment of Landscape Bonds Progress Report, which is a response to a Notice of Motion Notice of Motion 918, D18398670. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Martin.
Thanks. So I'd like to move a slight amendment and apologise I haven't circulated it, but essentially it is just point 2, receives a final report and just adding in the words by February 2020. So that's my only change. If I have a seconder, I'm happy to speak to this.
Councillor Bolton. Councillor Dorney. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, so this is actually sort of a follow-up report based on a notice of motion that was previously raised here in the chamber. Essentially, what we recognise as a council is we're losing a huge number of private realm trees. We have many strategies. We have urban forest strategy. We have urban heat island effect strategy. We have a lot of work is going into the public realm, but unfortunately, we are kind of consistently losing trees through the development process. You have a developer comes in and says, we're going to keep the tree there, we're going to build the building next door, and then a week later you realise, they said, sorry, we cut it down, we thought it was supposed to be cut down. So what this is actually going to do is, in essence, ask developers to give a bond up front for a particular tree, and obviously the details still need to be worked out through this process. But what it will be doing is actually, council will be potentially holding that money until the development is complete to make sure that the tree is intact as a way of preserving that tree. Again, the details are still to be worked out, but we're looking at significant or mature trees depending on the process that's followed. So I'd like to thank the officers for progressing this work and look forward to the final report. And we have given them quite a bit of time for the final report to come back because it is an incredibly complicated process. There's a lot of legalities that we need to work through, and there's a lot of different models that other councils are trialling as well. So really looking forward to this piece of work when it does eventually come back to us, and hopefully it's just another mechanism in addition to some of the provisions we put in our local laws to actually really protect trees in the private realm.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Donny, would you like to speak to this motion?
I don't have anything further to add. I think Councillor
Councillor
Martin's-
Riley?
I'm not speaking against. In favour?
Are there any speakers against? Councillor Riley?
I just want to reiterate what Councillor Martin said, but particularly at any point people are listening to us about how we're dealing with our trees. And in the private realm, we have the huge problem of starting in a city where we have massive urban heat island effect because of all the concrete and tar and the industrial nature of this city. We have taken steps to readdress that with our urban forest strategies, our cooling the upfill corridor strategy and many other strategies on our creeks and so on. However, the greatest threat to these strategies is what's happening on private land and the loss of trees during extensions and renovations. So all of our efforts are having to be doubled to actually account for what's being lost in the private realm. So I just wanted to get that across right now because every time I can I'm going to say this because we need people to be planting shady trees to address what's happening. Or we're going to have these incredible storms that we've just heard an account of what I think was possibly one of those, what was it, once in 20-year storm. It may have been once in 50 or 100 for all I know. I'd need to get more research. But we are going to be experiencing much more severe weather occurrences and we just need to have more tree coverage. So I'm just wanting people in the private realm to think about that and to replant when you do damage or trim them too much, replace them and get some decent shade trees going, please.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak to this motion? If there's no further debate, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Bring a couple of items forward.
Possibly. What would you like to bring forward?
The level crossing motion and also the Newlands Road motion.
Yep.
But there might be some other ones as well. People are starting to have had to leave, I know, but there's some still waiting.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's fine. So the Newlands Road first or the level crossing?
Either or, doesn't matter.
So perhaps a Newlands Road notice of motion. So I'll just find it. Yep, sure. So we just need to pause for a minute so that governance can catch up with from that perspective. So this will be notice of motion 5218 traffic safety on Newlands Road, Coburg North. Councillor Bolton.
Second.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Councillor Carly Hannon.
Okay, I think this motion is about traffic safety on Newlands Road. It goes through a number of measures that I'm proposing council investigates. We heard from residents in the chamber earlier tonight talking about the incredible risky nature of Newlands Road. And while there are lots of roads in Moreland that are, dangerous, bad traffic, congested, etc., I think there are some unique elements with Newlands Road. Firstly, it's a road where a lot of heavy cement trucks go through the middle of a residential area, and a residential area which attracts young families with kids because it's close to parks and playgrounds. And also there's a hill, which means the trucks are desperate not to lose speed as they're zooming up the hill, and also there's inadequate signage about speed limits, etc. And we heard earlier about the roundabout where unfortunately regularly vehicles run into people's fences and vehicles and potentially houses and potential for injury. So I might not go through all of the different measures I'm proposing, but I did meet with some residents who were talking about the range of issues on the street, and with the granting of permits for more factories in the street, which was a proposal that residents weren't aware of because there was a notice on the factory on the side, but it's just, people don't walk past there, so people were oblivious to the fact that this planning application was going through council. But that will increase the number of trucks progressing through a residential area. But at the moment, there are a range of issues, mostly around traffic, really wanting council to really investigate the length of the street for a range of traffic measures around the roundabout, around speed, lowering of speed, reducing the size of lanes to prevent, heavy trucks zooming around cars and potentially hitting them. Some issues about noise and engine brakes, but the major issues around safety and pedestrian crossings, and people can go through the range of items. But I think this, I wanted to move the motion tonight rather than leave it to the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, because I felt it would just get lost in the midst of a big traffic policy, and I think this needs specific attention.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Okay.
Councillor Carly Hannon.
Okay. So I commend Councillor Bolton for bringing this forward in the chamber. This is an issue that has been raised to me many times since becoming a councillor for the North East Ward, and I know I've spoken on several occasions around the issues of speed, recognising that this is a major road for freight, and we cannot and would likely not have any success in trying to actually reduce the speed of the whole of Newlands Road. So I think that it actually really is important to consider where the trucks are bending, where they're getting speed up, where there's a lot of pedestrians, and all those intersections that we can actually have a level of control to manage the speed and the risk to pedestrians.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Are there any other councillors? Councillor Martin?
I just have a slight amendment. I'd just like to add an extra point, and that is point 13, that the listed actions above, which are covered by the MITS strategy, are prioritised and consolidated as part of that process. So
I'm happy to accept that.
essentially what that is asking for is to, as part of the MITS action items that come out, any of these items that appear in both the MITS strategy and this, that these items are actually prioritised in the MITS work. So again, it just gives it that extra layer of prioritisation. So if it's amenable to the
Yeah, it's good.
movement second.
Thanks, Councillor Martin.
prioritised and consolidated in the delivery of MITs. Speak as well.
Thank you.
I would again like to thank Councillor Bolton for bringing this forward, and to the residents for coming tonight to raise this with us. I would like to also highlight that there are items in here which were removed from our MITS strategy. Council decided that they would not be advocating to Vic roads for slowing down of non-local roads, and so I think it's really important that recognising that there are roads that should be slowed down, that are Vic roads and are not local roads, and it is really important that we encourage Vic roads to reduce the speed right across the city on non-local roads. And I would like to acknowledge that while we only have about 40% of the city currently on our local roads at about 40 kilometres an hour, it's really a priority of the next MITS to be slowing local roads speed down right across the board to improve those conditions for cyclists, for pedestrians, for residents, to make sure that there isn't a random car driving through your front living room in the middle of the morning, as well as measures to really slow down the speed and limit the rat running, which is a huge problem in the city. So again, that'll be coming back to the February meeting for final adoption. I encourage everyone to come along to that meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this notice of motion? If there's no further debate, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We now move to the notice of motion concerning the level crossing removal by Councillor Tapanos, which is
thank you, Mayor.
notice of motion 5018.
I'll move a slight, as listed in the agenda, for some additional words which are up on the screen there. And that is to insert the words protection of heritage and also better connectivity, east-west connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists. If I have a second, I'll speak further.
Do I have a seconder for, oh sorry.
I'll have a second.
Councillor
I've got an amendment, so 1 second.
It might be better to just hear the amendments because they might be acceptable.
Yep.
The amendments for me? Yes. Okay. So, one of my amendments is in point 3, to add an extra sentence at the end that this consultation include community meetings with letterboxing of residents living along both sides of the rail corridor prior to the community meetings. And my second amendment sort of relates to the protection of heritage, but it's a little bit more specific. So maybe you might want to consider, it could be protection of, so what I had is protection or preservation of the heritage character of the upfield line and stations, because the whole line is heritage listed.
Yes,
it's the only line in.
Yeah.
Both of those acceptable?
Yes. I don't think the second one's really needed, but I'm happy to incorporate it. I think it's just along the version than what was already there.
And are you still happy to second the motion? I've got you as a seconder.
Councillor Bolton, do you want to second that motion?
Sorry?
Do you want to second that motion overall?
It's okay, that's right.
I'm happy to second.
Okay.
Is the other way.
So I've had the motion, which was Councillor Tapanos's motion, was seconded by Councillor O'Farnley and then amended by Councillor Bolton. And the amendment is acceptable to you?
Yes, so it's all incorporated.
So,
okay, thank you. Okay, so councillors, I know that we've spoken about level crossing removals in this chamber a lot over probably the past 10 years. So it's now coming to a time when we are going to start seeing these become a reality. And we've always said that we want to get as many level crossings done as possible. We were pleased 4 years ago to get the announcement of Coburg and also Glenroy. And now we are pleased to have an announcement of 2 others, making a bit of a precinct on the upfield line between Bell and Moreland. So that is welcome news in my view. We do note, as I did earlier during question time, but the method is not in our hands, but it is entirely in the hands of the state government and the Level Crossing Removal Authority. However, I think what it is imperative we do as a local government is make sure that we get the best possible outcome for our community, regardless of what model they pick. And I think that this motion, particularly dot point 4, details some of the key areas that we want to see be the focus of whatever future solution is selected. So we know that it will be elevated rail, but we don't actually know what type of technology will be used. These are all decisions that are yet to come. And as a council, it would be prudent of us to be actively engaging with the LXRA and the state governments to get the best possible outcome. I need to note that there is great opportunities here for Moreland to unlock many problems that have plagued our city for a number of years, particularly around the upfield line, the upfield bicycle shared path, and extending that, a big priority for us. To increase the open space in our city and green spaces in our city, a big objective. To increase tree canopy, to increase artistic and sporting precincts within our city, big opportunities. But perhaps the biggest one of all is to actually create better connectivity from the residential areas to our shopping precinct along Sydney Road. I see these being significant benefits, and I would hope that that we are able to utilise this opportunity to realise those benefits, including some of our own projects here in Central Coburg and some of the other state government projects that are to occur along the line. When realised, this will reform our city a little bit and reform the area along the railway line. If you have a look at the 2 options that were considered, I think elevated rail is far superior than the trench model. I do honestly believe that after having read all of the information on it. And I do believe that if we actually get some of that information into the hand of residents, the community will support that approach.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos.
My time's up. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Afanli?
Thank you to the residents who have taken time out of their nights to come here this evening. Hopefully it's been an entertaining council meeting for you so far. And I guess you're out here because you haven't had the opportunity to be consulted properly by the LXRA, who overall make that decision on whether we go up or down or when that project gets completed, etc., which is quite disappointing. And Councillor Tapanos is calling for more consultation between the community and the LXRA. Let's see some plans, let's see what the engineers are coming up with and what the actual overall look and feel is, and then consult the community so they've got a proper picture of it. And they're coming out to the council chambers because they want to voice their concerns, and this is the only local avenue that you've got that opportunity. So I appreciate you sharing your concerns. You also want to hear what does the local representatives actually think about this project and what their position is. Councillor Tapanos has put forward his views. I'll actually like to put forward my views. I'm quite supportive of doing all between Moreland Road, Moreland Station and Coburg Station, a whole of line solution, whether it is trench or above ground. I wouldn't see the whole lot go through. No, so it's not sort of up, down, because there's a far more better project and better opportunities to actually encapsulate more roads, being able to go east-west. In terms of what Councillor Martin spoke about earlier tonight, the other things we need to think about is what impact does trench or Skyrail have on cyclists, because it's a very substantial cyclist route. What impact does it have on pedestrians, and what impact does it have on lighting in terms of the amenities of the neighbouring properties? So there's a lot more to flesh out. We're here endorsing the announcement for the 4 level crossing removals for upfield line, and now we want to actually encourage more consultation with the community to actually flesh out what that actually means, and then get your feedback in a proper forum with the engineers, with the project managers, and with the body that actually oversees this project.
Thank you, Councillor Afanley. Councillor Bolton?
Yeah, I'll speak in favour of the motion. I started this process of not being sure whether I was in favour of Skyrail or the trench model, but I think I'm now leaning strongly towards the line going underground. I don't think it's a fait accompli, even though there's been a government announcement about Skyrail, because I think it's only now that residents are starting to engage in the issue. And I wish that a couple of council meetings ago, when I moved the motion for council to advocate for more consultation, we'd agreed to doing a proper public meeting, because I think there is a need for everyone to hear all sides of the debate at the same time in the same meeting, a proper good old-fashioned public meeting, because I feel that some people are making the decision on the basis of not full knowledge, and I think, you know, even the community drop-in sessions, the people who did hear about them found them totally inadequate, and got different information because you're talking to different staff members from the LXRA. So at least this is a bit of a step forward, you know, advocating more consultation. So it'd be great if councillors pass that, because I think that at least should be the bottom line. Would be better to have a public meeting, but, you know, at least this is a little bit a step forward, and at least there is a little bit of specificity. Certainly that issue of the noise. One of the issues with Skyrail is that it's often quieter underneath, but it transmits the noise over a wider area. So it's sort of, in reality, the consultation probably needs to be wider than just the immediate neighbours in the corridor. And council really should, you know, advocate for broader consultation than just narrow consultation. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Martin?
Thank you. And, you know, I rise to also support this motion. It's one thing that's kind of really become apparent in the last few years of being on this council. The state government does consultation very poorly. And we've seen it with tram stops, we're seeing it with LXRA. I mean, I myself was letterboxed. Like I said before, if we do end up with a Skyrail situation, I'll be sitting in my backyard looking at the Skyrail, because it will sit above the houses between myself and the train line. I am willing to look at Skyrail every time I go into my backyard if I am convinced that the state government and the Level Crossing Removal Authority has actually proven that this is the best outcome for our community. So that is something that we still need to see more evidence, and we need to see more information about that. Again, we are not the decision makers here. I really encourage everyone to contact your local state member, depending on where you fall. And I also really encourage you to talk to the candidates at the upcoming election, because it's really important that they are also a voice for you into the future. But as I said, both Trench and Skyrail has its drawbacks. Both have potential impacts on heritage. Both have potential impacts around accessibility. And so there's lots of things that we need to consider as a city, as a community. And it is really important that while this can be really heated emotionally, because it impacts a lot of people directly, I think it's really important that we have a balanced discussion about the benefit to the wider community, and not just people like me who will potentially be staring at the Skyrail if it does go in.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to this motion? If there's no further comments, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. So I'll now return to the agenda as it was written, and the next item is DCS 5318, which is the governance report, November 2018, the cyclical report. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Riley?
Yes, thank you. This is a rather large report with many items in it.
Let me just get you a second.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to second this omnibus?
Oh, is this governance or is
Yes,
this financial?
governance.
The governance report.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. There are many items in this going from committees to council assemblies, notices of items from previous council meetings, and there will be a major item we'll come back to in a minute, which is portfolio councils and councils' representatives on various committees, internally and externally to the council. And then there's an appointment of authorisation to enforce the Planning and Environment Act. There's a couple of appointments going there, and a domestic animal management plan 2017-2021 year one annual review and evaluation, and an update on the renewal of our childcare and kindergarten leases, of which I think there are more than 50. So there's a lot in this, and I don't prepared to go into all the detail. The most important thing is now that we do come to the councils responsible for, and they are now listed for you to read on the screen. And then there's another tranche of committees that we are appointed to. So should we read these out or just leave them? So I'm hoping the people who are watching us are happy to indulge us, and rather than read them all out, that you can actually will be able to read the agenda because you've got it online. Yep. Or we will certainly make sure these are distributed and people get to see them. So they are flashing up before your eyes if you're here in the chamber. I don't know how many committees there all are, but there's at least 4 or 5 pages worth, rather than reading all of those. The most important thing is that councils actually indicate now whether they are happy with this, or whether in fact they need to amend or change any of those details there.
I think
I'll leave it with you.
I've checked in quite a few times with councillors about what's there.
It hasn't been updated from Monday's discussion.
Yep. Is there anything that you noticed that's an anomaly? That's
Just an update from Monday's discussion. There was a couple of notes that I don't think have been included on what's on the board. For example, I was removed from Arts and Culture and put onto Transport, sharing it with Mark Riley. So that, and there was a couple of other ones as well that were discussed. So I'm not sure if that's the most updated version.
That's true.
That's okay. That could just be my oversight, but that's fine. We can put you there. And
It's the same with the committees as well.
Yep.
Do we want to just lay this on the table and come back to it before the end of the meeting to just check with the notes?
Yeah, we can do that.
Is that all right?
Well, I thought I had updated it. So is that the only thing that's different?
On that one, yes, but I need to go through the committees.
Yep. Well, let's lay it on the table.
And pick it up later.
Yeah, and I can send it to you again.
So, just through the mayor? Yep. So if you want to lay it on the table, then we'll need a procedural motion to do that.
Oh, yes.
My suggestion would be that at some point there's an adjournment for a few minutes to allow you to resolve it, and then you come back in, pick it up off the table and move it forward. Okay?
Yes. Well, if if the so what we'll do is we'll put the laying it on the table to the vote. So all those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. And I will propose a break, and we can have a look at it. I don't think anybody's waiting for anything at the moment. So do we need to go to a motion for a break?
No, you can
So I'll just adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes, and we'll find the missing councillors and work out what's happening. Thank you. Okay.
Hey Moreland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride!
G'day guys, my name's Chris.
Hi!
I'm here from Moreland City Council just to show you a bit about this tractor and how it works and what we do and how we get around and cut all the grass on the ovals. How's that? Is that better? You want to play tag with the tractor? Your teachers would like that very much.
Goodbye. He's going through the bump. There he goes through the gate.
In 2009, Council began research and consultation to identify the key challenges in sport for women and girls within Moreland.
The review identified several issues.
There was a serious lack of female competition and teams.
Only 8% of participants using council sports grounds were female.
To address this inequality, Council introduced a policy to encourage clubs to be more inclusive of women, juniors, people with a disability and people from culturally diverse communities, or risk losing an allocation of a ground to a club that is being inclusive.
Female participation has now increased by 161% in Moreland.
Vujcevic Football Club is proud to align with Moreland's policy.
This year we successfully launched the club's first ever under-12 girls footy team.
We're changing our club. We're changing our culture.
I'm changing the game.
So I'm Claire Johnston and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker and the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There's a lot of bats out there for men and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Vale Headfield Cricket Club for their under-13s girls cricket team. And yeah, to see their faces when they were given the cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I'd really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, the local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and yeah, work to make great cricket bats.
My name's Leslie. I have been with Moreland Family Daycare as an educator for over 36 years, I think. Family Daycare is a wonderful organisation. We look after children in our own home, they blend in with the family, and it's fantastic.
I love Family Daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children just growing and developing is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me every day. I'd recommend Family Daycare to anybody and everybody. Oh, where's my Scouty snuggle? Where's my Scouty snuggle? Can I have a Scouty snuggle? How's your tea party going?
My name's Hilary. I've been with Moreland Family Daycare for 8 months now and I absolutely love it. The main reason I started with Family Daycare was to be with my little one. Family Daycare is a small environment, so mostly I only have 4 children and it's in a home. Moreland have been really supportive of the whole thing and they helped me find children when I first started. There's so many benefits of working Family Daycare and becoming an educator. Working in your own home, flexible hours, also just watching the other children grow and being such a part of their life. I recommend to educators that want a good life balance if they have their own child. Family Daycare is a great avenue to go down.
Hey Moreland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride!
G'day guys, my name's Chris. I'm here from Moreland City Council just to show you a bit about this tractor and how it works and what we do and how we get around and cut all the grass on the ovals.
How's that? Is that better?
You want to play tag with the tractor? Your teachers would like that very much.
Goodbye.
He's going through the bump. There he goes through the gate. That's good.
In 2009, Council began research and consultation to identify the key challenges in sport for women and girls within Moreland.
The review identified several issues.
There was a serious lack of female competition and teams. Only 8% of participants using council sports grounds were female.
To address this inequality, Council introduced a policy to encourage clubs to be more inclusive of women, juniors, people with a disability and people from culturally diverse communities, or risk losing an allocation of a ground to a club that is being inclusive.
Female participation has now increased by 161% in Moreland.
Vujcevic Football Club is proud to align with Moreland's policy.
This year we successfully launched the club's first ever under-12 girls footy team.
We're changing our club. We're changing our culture.
I'm changing the game.
So I'm Claire Johnston and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker and the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There's a lot of bats out there for men and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make it.
Thank you. Welcome back, councillors and people watching at home and members of the gallery. So the next item, sorry, we need to take that back off the table, don't we?
I move to take it back off the table. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Tapnos, and Councillor Martin, do we need a seconder? So all those in favour of taking this motion off the table? Thanks, declare that carried. So we're just going back to DCS 5318, the governance report. We've clarified the detail that we need to clarify about who's doing what for the next year. Councillor Riley moved the motion and Councillor Martin seconded it. Would anybody like to talk further to this motion?
Just one other thing. I just want to acknowledge there are quite a number of donations that have come to the Moreland Arts Advisory Committee, or the board actually, and they are listed there. Significantly, a couple of those are actually Noel Coonahan works, which we're very proud to have offered to us. So I encourage people to have a look at that. And just also note that the festival's reference group has concluded its work, and it's been going since this council formed in 2016. And after 2 years, it's now concluded its work. And that was because we had a different way of conducting our festivals. They were run by the Moreland Performing Arts Moreland group, and that changed now to an in-house group, and we now run them in-house, and we're using that reference group to work through that transition. And now the work of that group will now be taken up by the Moreland Arts Board as part of its its brief, if you like. So I just want people to be aware of that, and I really wanted to thank the members of that committee and the staff who've worked to resource that committee. It's been really important, and we have some other more important business coming to us around festivals, but that we'll deal with that at another stage.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Carly Hannon.
I just wanted to touch on really quickly about the childcare and kindergarten lease renewals that are underway, and how important our community childcare and kindergartens are, and particularly with the 3-year-old kindergarten that's going to be rolled out in, I think it is 2020 for our municipality, for all children to be able to attend. So we're going to be needing to assist all of our childcare and kindergartens to fulfil that rollout.
Thanks, Councillor Carly Hannon. Anybody else like to speak to this report? Councillor Martin?
I just wanted to highlight one thing, and it's something that we have regularly, and I don't know if I'm the sole recipient, I doubt that I am, but residents contact me quite frequently about parking, and in particular getting officers out to find people who are parking illegally in their street. And it's a frustration which is right across the board. And there is a section in here, and I do encourage people to look at it. Apologies, I'm looking at the next report.
Totally forgiving,
I know that feeling,
Councillor
Councillor Martin.
It's happened to me many times as well. Before we put this motion to the vote, I just wanted to add from my own experiences that I really want to thank everybody that I've been involved in committees with. If I'm not staying on the committees that I've been on with you over the last 2 years, I'll be regretting it. But I have a bit of a bigger workload, and so I look forward to the exciting tales I'll hear about the people who have taken over some of those positions. So, unless there are any other councillors who wish to speak to this motion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We'll move on. DCS 5418, Financial Management Report for the period ending 30th September 2018, Cyclical Report. Councillor Martin.
Yes. If I have a seconder, I'm happy to speak to it.
Councillor Carly-Hannon.
So, touching on the report, and Moreland Council, we are in a fantastic financial position, and it is the work of a lot of our officers, corporate services, and many people right across the council. Now, one thing I would like to touch on is something that I was touching on previously, and that is parking infringements, and it is something that residents have spoken to me quite a lot about. We're trialling 2 new foot patrol areas in the Coburg CBD, the Glenroy CBD. We are changing the way that council issues clearway infringements to improve efficiency, and we're also having a daily patrol of 5 schools in the morning and afternoon. So this is primarily because residents have been telling us that they are sick of people parking illegally, and it is something that we are actively doing in our city. And I really wanted to highlight that, as well as the operating result as a fantastic operating result. Again, $11.5 million, and also something really important, and that is that our solvency, so our liquidity ratio at council, is sitting at 1.7. So that is higher than what the Victorian Auditor General's office actually recommends, and that is again showing the financial management nous and capability that we have in Moreland in managing our finances.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Carly-Hannon? Councillor
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to briefly touch on the fact that we are flagging an increase with regard to our enterprise agreement. It's not been completely dealt with by the Fair Work Commission. However, it's a really important result that we've managed to do that, and we're actually doing that within our budget. So there's a 2.25% increase across our wages as part of that will involve back pay. I just want to mention that because it's such an important matter at the moment in terms of fairness and equity, in terms of access to wages across our communities. And I just think it's important that we acknowledge that we are trying to do our bit as a council to keep people at pace of with the cost of living and so on. So I want to thank officers for that work, but we will look forward to being signed off by the Commission.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. If there's no further debate on this item, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next item on the agenda is DCI 4518, Kids Undercover Donation Program, D18 62475. Do I have a mover for this report? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm not moving.
Councillor O'Farnley?
Sure.
Thank you. And seconder? Sorry, Councillor Martin. Councillor O'Farnley, would you like to speak to this?
Very briefly to explain it, this is in relation to the process that we undertake when we have abandoned vehicles in a municipality. We're making some changes in relation to that in regards to one of the organisations that are engaged in that currently, and the report outlines those changes. It's on officers' recommendations that these changes make place, and I support their recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor O'Farnley. Councillor Martin? Any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. So the next item is DCS 5518, proposed right-of-way discontinuance and sale adjoining 8 Newman Street, Brunswick. D 18399286. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Carly Hannon?
We need our names.
Yep.
Mayor in Southwood.
Yep. So we're just proposing, are you happy to propose that, Councillor Carly Hannon?
Yeah, that it's
Mayor and South Ward councillors?
Yep.
So do I have a seconder for this motion, this report? Councillor Tapanos? Councillor Carly Hannon, would you like to talk? Councillor Tapanos?
Sale of right away.
Let's just begin the process.
Beginning the process, so they're going to go out to.
Councillor Bolton, do you need to? So if there is no further debate on this item, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next report is DCS 5618, right-of-way discontinuance and sale adjoining 13 Strathern Avenue, Coburg. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Martin? Councillor Carly Hannon? Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to the report?
No.
Councillor Carly Hannon? And with no more debate, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. Declare that carried. The next item is DCS 5718, request to raise the West Papuan flag, D18/421538. Councillor Riley? Councillor Bolton? Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to this report?
Yeah, just briefly, this is just to, we took this decision last year to support the raising of the West Papuan flag, and we had a very positive response from the community around this, and we wanted to continue this as a mark of respect for this community that came to Australia some time ago.
Can I just clarify that you're moving it with an additional point about the letter?
Oh yes, certainly.
So that's the point 5 has been added that
Thank
wasn't
you.
on the agenda.
That we
Good idea.
write to the community and advise them, very good. So just really just to, it's a way of showing solidarity with this community who are Indigenous people to the Western Papuan areas of which is now currently part of Indonesia. And there's been a lot of contention around how that was done during a UN process in the 60s. And this is one way of trying to support that community to allow them to have a right to self-determination into their future. So we stand something that we've taken a decision on, and I'm hoping the council will support it again. And this will continue until the end of the period of this council, and then it will allow the next council to make a decision on that in the future.
Councillor Bolton.
I see this as being very connected to the work that council already does around East Timor. It is a very similar issue of, they're very similar histories of the two countries or two oppressed peoples. But East Timor actually managed to liberate itself. There was a massive movement in Australia in support of East Timorese independence. West Papua is a situation which is less known about, but there are still quite strong connections between the West Papuan community and the Australian community. Australia's got a bit of an implication in this because Australia has mining investments in West Papua and so has not taken historically a good position because it's been more interested in preserving those mining investments rather than the human rights abuses of people who were denied independence. I certainly support this motion. I think it is it's an area of the world that Australia has a very close connection with, and I think we should continue supporting the West Papuans.
I just wanted to propose an amendment, just because I feel it's been omitted since the initial motion, which was 4117, which was that we also write another letter to the federal government to support, advocating that they support self-determination for the West Papuan community, because it's in the background notes, and I just feel it was left out of the motion. So if that's acceptable to the mover and seconder, then we can add that in. Yep. So, rights to the federal government advocating for support to self-determination for the West Papuan community.
Indigenous communities, I think we should come with that. Can we make it Indigenous, please, Sally?
Thank you. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? Councillor Tapanos.
Not sure if I'm against just as yet, but I'll speak nonetheless. There are times in this chamber when I feel like I'm at the UN. This is certainly one of those. And look, I must admit, I actually just don't know enough about the situation in West Papua. I know that Australia has very close ties, and I think might have even been the authority over West Papua for a long period of time before Indonesian. But yes, I think I'm going to stop there because I'm proving that I actually don't know enough about this issue. But the question I have is this. If we continue down this path, then the question rises, why aren't we raising the flag of Banda Aceh on the other side of Indonesia, who are also seeking independence? I mean, what is the difference? How are we selective? How are we picking? How are we making these judgment calls about what we advocate on and what we don't? Which community do we say deserves self-determination? I mean, these are quite complex, emotive issues that have substantial histories, and blood's been spilled and wars have been fought and movements have been going on for hundreds of years. So for us to make these calls in the chamber without that adequate information is something that I would normally caution against. Certainly this is well in the realm of the federal governments and the UN and international relations system, and may I say that I would probably be very supportive of an autonomous or independent movement in West Papua, but I just feel a little bit uncomfortable with these decisions here because I just don't know where we draw the line. So is it Banda Aceh, or then is it Bali? Is it another? Is it Borneo? Is there provinces in other neighbouring areas? Are there provinces in Africa, such as the Western Sahara? Is it Nagorno-Karabakh in Armenia? Is it South Ossetia? I mean, where is it that we actually draw the line? Because there is a lot of conflict in the world, and there are a lot of these situations, and I just don't want to be inconsistent, I guess, and say we will fly this flag, which will certainly please the West Papuan community, but may also disappoint a lot of our Indonesian community, but certainly caution because it's just so emotive and contentious in the community.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Would anybody else like to speak against or in favour of this motion? I'll just take a moment to clarify something and put into context why I'll be supporting the motion, which is just simply that the West Papuan community has written to us and asked us to raise the flag. So maybe Banda Aceh might write to us as well, but at this point it's something we've been asked to do, and it's something we've done in the past. I have no problem supporting it again. So if there's no further debate, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next item is DCI 4618, Contract Supply and Delivery of Bulk Fuel, D 18391642. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Bolton? And a seconder? Councillor Riley? Councillor Bolton, would you like to talk to it? Councillor Riley?
No, I'm thankful for the officers for doing the work.
Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? No further debate. I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next report we need to consider is DCI 4718, Contract 714T, Morris Reserve Sports Pavilion. Hello, Helen, sorry.
That's okay.
Too busy looking at the paper. Councillor Davidson.
Yes, if I could move the recommendations as read on page 392.
Do you have a seconder for this? Councillor Martin?
And just to note, there's a little typo on point 7, that construction would be completed by late June 2019, not 18. So this is to award the contract for Morris Reserve. This is a great local reserve, and it's going to be privileged to have a new pavilion provided with toilets, and it will help the local community and also the sporting clubs that use it provide better facilities for the local AFL club, netball and cricket. So I'm looking forward to the construction commencing.
Thanks,
and
Councillor
the tender
Davidson.
being awarded.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Martin? Any councillors like to speak against this motion? No further debate. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. So that concludes the presentation of the officer reports. We can now move into the notices of motion, and we've already done 5018, which was the level crossing removal. So we can move to notice of motion 5118, Brunswick Baths weekend opening hours, D18 416624. Councillor Tapanos.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, councillors, I'll just be quick.
I'll just ask for a seconder, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Bolton, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Tapanos.
So I'll just be quick because at this stage it is just calling for a report, although it is kind of urgent, I guess, because summer is upon us effectively. But look, as our community grows, I think we ought to grow our service level to them. And we have a fantastic facility that has been renewed over the last 5 or 6 years, and it would be great for it to get full utilisation. Now, I can imagine that there would be times, particularly in summer, when it would be great to have the pools opening earlier. They're in such great demand for by all of our community. So I think that this report will hopefully investigate the cost implications and the benefits for having extended opening hours on the weekends from 6 to 10 p.m. Currently, I believe it's from 8 to 8 on the weekends. So I think those additional extended hours will be well utilised, and it may just come at a small cost to council, if not be cost recovery model. So I think it's worth investigating, and if possible, I look forward to hopefully moving the motion in December to actually implement this and increase those opening hours during summer, during January and February.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Bolton.
I'm definitely in support of this motion. I think some of the residents in Fawkner would dream of having the opening hours of Brunswick Baths, because at the moment some of the residents in Fawkner have to go to Moonee Ponds to use their pool, their outdoor pool, because of the lack of opening hours in Fawkner. I gather council has been involved in the consultation process just recently about opening hours, and certainly I've been contacted a lot by residents each summer or in the lead up to summer, or when summer's just starting, hoping for the pools to open a bit earlier because of when it's hot weather. So yeah, I'm certainly in support of this motion, and it fits in with the motion I'm about to move around heat.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any councillors who would like to speak against this motion? If there's no further debate, I'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, Liv, did you want to speak there?
No,
sorry.
Add Fawkner in as well.
All those against? Declare that carried. Okay, so we've had notice of motion 5218, which was the traffic safety on Newlands Road, so I'll move ahead to notice of motion 5318, preparations for extreme heat in the 2018-19 summer. Councillor Bolton.
So I've actually read this motion out. It's headed preparations for extreme heat in the 2018-19 summer. And it reads that Council receives a report at the December 2018 Council meeting assessing the adequacy of available cool venues for Moreland residents for periods of extended heat in the 2018-19 summer. 2, brings forward the opening of the outdoor pools if extreme heat begins in November. 3, conducts an inventory of the water fountains in parks and public streets and squares to assess any gaps where water fountains are needed. 4, calls on the state government to include in its state emergency response plan assistance to councils to provide cool venues for residents to cope with periods of extreme heat and to allocate adequate funds in the state budget to resource local councils and community sector organisations to respond to heat wave emergencies.
Can I have a seconder, please? Well, I'm happy to second this.
Can I have a query?
Yep.
I'm just the mover, Councillor Bolton. This resolution is asking us that we actually adopt tonight the bringing forward of opening hours in extreme heat in November. Is that part of the report that's referred to in number 1? It reads like it's a separate.
Oh, I guess I was thinking it would be part of the report.
Yeah, thanks.
So maybe it needs to read 1 and then A, B and C?
Yeah.
Oh no, 1, A,
1
and then
B.
2 and 3, maybe?
Sorry.
Conducts an inventory. So the report
Yeah.
includes bringing forward the opening of the pools, then point 2 is conducts an inventory, and point 3 is calls on the state government.
Yeah, so it could be at the end of point 1, including bringing forward the opening of the outdoor pools, and then the other 2 points would be standalone.
That's what they've done.
Yeah, no, you're a good pick up.
Great.
Well,
So-
I'll speak in favour of this. I brought this motion forward partly because I put something forward after the heat wave in 2014, and then following on from that motion, a report was adopted in late 2014, although I think it might have got a bit lost in the bowels of the organisation. So I think we need to revisit it, especially given the extreme heat of the Northern Hemisphere experience this year. Now, I don't know if, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if Australia will experience such an extreme summer as the Northern Hemisphere did, but the summer in the Northern Hemisphere was absolutely unprecedented, with 50 plus degrees heat in some places, and parts of the Northern Hemisphere which normally only go up to the 20s in summer, going up to 40 plus degrees. So this, I guess you can assume that there's a strong likelihood that something like this may happen in Victoria this year. And certainly in 2014, when we had an extensive period of heat, of extreme heat, plus 40 degrees, people were really suffering, because for the first night or 2, people went to the pub or the cinema or wherever, it was cool. But, you can't afford to fork out money to visit a cool place all of the time. You need, especially if you work in a blue-collar job, you need to have a decent sleep the night before, otherwise you're dangerous at work. There were blackouts during, so even people who had air conditioners, there were a lot of blackouts at the time, so the air conditioners were actually useless. And at the time, I think, of that, the only venue council had to offer was council libraries. So there are people using libraries for the normal usages, but also people escaping the heat. But I feel that if we have an even worse heat wave than 2014, I think our libraries will start to struggle to cope, especially as our libraries are catering for picking up on more and more government services which are being de-staffed, as in, our council staff having, or that council librarians having to advise people how to fill in Centrelink forms and tax forms, etc., as those government departments are de-staffed. But also, I think one gap in the state's emergency response plan is dealing with extreme heat. So at the moment, if there's bushfires or floods, they set up a relief centre at the blink of an eye. But when it comes to heat, extreme heat, there's not a similar emergency response plan, despite the fact that, say, the Black Saturday bushfires and the other similar statistics, in that week around those fires, which were a terrible tragedy of, I think around 180 people losing their lives, there were also almost 400 people lost their lives as a result of heat stroke. So I feel that, if we have a more extreme summer this year than we've had previously, I don't think the systems are ready to cope. So I'd like to recommend this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I feel like it's all been covered, so I won't speak to it as a seconder. Councillor Munn? Sorry, Nerina, did you just provide some?
I have a question probably on the same line. So my question is just noting that in the report it actually states that a report assessing the adequacy of available cool venues for Moreland residents during periods of extended heat is not able to be provided by December 2018. And so I just wanted to understand from officers, given they've stated they're not going to be able to provide this report, why, as a council, we would be progressing with that, knowing that it's not attainable.
So, may I? Yep. So just through the Mayor, that is exactly the bit of advice I wanted to provide. So there's parts of this we can do by December. To get to the December cycle, we have to do we have to complete all this in a fortnight. We've got the inventory, the drinking fountain inventory was coming to December anyway, so that's fine. No issue there. The pool opening hours, we can get to December, that's no worries. The report on the adequacy of cool venues, so to do an assessment of the adequacy of all of our venues in terms of whether they're good from a perspective of being able to be a drop-in place for residents, that's a big assessment to make in a fortnight. So this is the advice we're giving. Now, unless there's a desktop discussion about our general provisions around heatwave and what happens, because we do have our own heatwave plan, and there's a number of things that do happen when that occurs, but we don't provide drop-in centres at this point. So we're not set up to do that. Now, if we did an audit, an assessment, it would need more time than getting it done within a fortnight. So maybe there might be another way just to make it a slightly lighter thing, so that we can provide you some advice by December.
I've got a suggestion. So receives a report at the December 2018 council meeting assessing the availability of cool venues. And I could add in an extra dot point that a report be presented in 2019 about adequacy of, cool venues.
May I, through the Mayor, if so long as there's an understanding that it's a lighter touch on that assessment. So
I'm just worried because the extreme heat
exactly
may happen in January.
Exactly, that's right.
Council's not meeting.
Yeah, so we can make some commentary on what's currently available for people, whether that's generally being utilised, whether it's being overutilised, all of that sort of thing. We can make that sort of commentary and assessment. It's just if you want an assessment of all of our possible cool venues, that's a much bigger piece of work, and that could be in the new year.
I think if we just, maybe the wording could be available, assessing the availability of cool venues, and probably the rest of it sounds like, that is okay, and then, maybe that report, there might lead to other things further down the track.
There was an additional, just through the Mayor, one last thing just to consider. There's an additional point that Sally's just put on the board to cover a further report in 2019, which is the assessment of adequacy. If you'd like that included, that's a way to do it. All right, sounds like that's what Councillor Bolton would like to include.
Great.
Yep. So I'll be supporting this motion. I just wanted to speak on a couple of things to do with heat in this city and the work that has been done on the urban heat island effect and the recognition that we do need to make our municipality and the public spaces, public realm, much more livable and safe during periods of heat. So that involves our urban forest strategy, our water play, making sure that our streets have areas that people can go that are shaded, that have water, and these kind of things as well. I think that it will be important to look at the adequacy of council facilities, because I think there is actually a challenge for a council in meeting the needs in a heat wave, as human bodies actually do increase the heat. And I can imagine with a lot of our venues, even just going to like a council meeting in the summertime, you can find to be actually really hot, because we also have heritage buildings and the inability to actually cool a lot of these spaces to meet even the needs that we currently have in these spaces. I want to mention that private realms actually can do this a lot better, and sometimes I have heard the notion that these might not be free, so to speak, but there actually is the chance with a lot of shopping centres and these kind of places that you actually can hang out in them at a fairly reduced cost. And the biggest challenge I actually think we face as a council is people being trapped in their homes, because in a heat wave, you actually can't get out, or you can't spend a whole day in any space without being able to go home. So as a council, I think when we look at the livability for our older people, people with disabilities and those kind of things, it's really important to think about, well, what could we do to be actually transporting people in periods of extreme heat? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carly Hannon. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this motion?
I know you don't normally get wrote, but there's one bit I didn't explain.
Yeah, because there was no speaker against, there's no right of reply, and I'm at the point, thank you, Mr. Dolby, where I need to...
Point 3 I wanted to explain, but...
Yeah, I think I need to put the motion to the vote. So all those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I need to ask for a motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes. Councillor Riley, Councillor Martin, put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, so the next item is notice of motion 5418, accessible stores and venues in Moreland, D18/416657. Councillor Martin.
I'm happy to put the notice of motion as written. If I have a seconder, I'm happy to speak to the item.
I'd like to second it.
Me,
Councillor Abboud.
Firstly, I'd like to thank all of the members of the community that have contacted me over the last couple of months. I've been speaking with many members of our community, many of whom have a need for fully accessible tram stops, but also broader needs, which I've become aware of. So I'd like to really thank those residents, and a big thanks to Christian, to Deb and Mel for putting some of these ideas into my head and being able to actually verbalise this. Essentially, what we're asking for here is to receive a report to look at a council-run program that is essentially a sticker that you stick on your window that identifies that your store is fully accessible. It also explores looking at whether or not there's toilets that are available to the public, because these are some of the issues that people face on a regular basis. An online map or planning tool that will also enable people to plan their days, looking at these venues, having this information at hand, and also exploring any additional programs that might be able to be considered, such as low sensory shopping or other council services that may be able to be provided. With this information coming back, also looking at options for a grants program to actually incentivise traders to retrofit shop fronts, internal layouts, or for toilets to be made accessible. And ideally, this report coming back with enough time to be included in the budget process for next year. So it is quite a sort of a straightforward concept, but we do need a lot of input from those living with a disability. And so this will be going to the Disability Working Group and also looking at going to some of the traders associations to receive input from them also.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Yep.
I was just wondering what you mean by accessible, because quite often people use the word accessible when they mean wheelchair accessible. And because accessible, because there's a range of disabilities, accessible fully accessible means a lot of different things in terms of different abilities or different disabilities. But I think it will be most useful if this is quite specific, so that people who've got a particular disability who might be expecting something to be accessible and then discover it's only wheelchair accessible but not accessible to other abilities.
Well, if I can just respond, so essentially this is going to the Disability Working Group, so I don't feel like it's really my place to be defining what accessibility is, and I'll be looking to the Disability Working Group to really answer that question. Ideally, it's fully accessible venues, so catering for a wide spectrum, but you are 100% correct, there are varying levels of disability and accessibility. So I will be really looking to the working group to provide further detail around that. I wanted to leave it quite broad in that sense to allow further advice from them.
Thank you, Councillor.
I hope that's acceptable.
And as the seconder, I just want to flag that I mentioned this notice of motion at the Human Rights Committee meeting to the chair of the Disability Working Group, and he actually cheered because I think that while there are varying degrees and complexities of accessibility or issues surrounding or concerned with accessibility, how inaccessible everything is, we can't even imagine. And I guess I also wanted to reassure you that you'll be on the working group so you can feed into those conversations as well. So I think I really commend the motion. I'm really proud to be able to support it, and I think it will be well received. Are there any councillors who wish to speak against the motion? Any other councillors who would like to speak for the motion? If there's no further debate, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. And can we have that recorded as unanimous, please? Oh, that concludes our notices of motion. So the next item is notices of rescission. Is that how you say that? And there are none, so we'll move right on. Councillors, are there any foreshadowed items that anybody would like to flag that they're intending to submit at a future council meeting? Councillor Riley? Councillor Martin?
I just would like to, just a public service announcement, and just let people who may be still watching at home know that the waste and litter strategy is coming to the December meeting, and I really encourage people that made submissions to that strategy to come down and see its final adoption.
Any other councillors like to flag anything that they plan to submit in the future for the next meeting? Okay, so I'll close this meeting to the public so that we can consider the confidential business items. So I need a motion to close the meeting. Thank you, councillors Riley and Bolton. Riley and Martin. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.